We are live.
Okay, thank you very much. And welcome everybody to the Township of Georgian Bay Council meeting of yesterday and today, and we're reconvening, and we'll start with, I would like to get moved by Councillor Wienko, seconded by Councillor Douglas. Do I see Councillor Douglas?
Nope.
So I'll say seconded by Councillor Bocek. Be it resolved, the council does now reconvene at 9:02 a.m. on Tuesday, April 13th, 2021. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. As is my usual habit, and which I also believe is very important, I want to acknowledge that we are on the lands traditionally occupied by Indigenous peoples. They continue to care for this land. They continue to shape our township. They continue to live amongst us. And we want to show our respect. Hundreds of years after the first treaties were signed, they remain relevant today in guiding our decisions and our actions. Megwich. Gentlemen, I can say that because I don't see Councillor Douglas. Gentlemen, do you have any declarations of pecuniary interest or code of conduct conflicts or anything along that line? I'm seeing a lot of head shaking, so I figure that we have none to declare. And if we are ready, I think there's a presentation of a couple of awards. Is there not?
Yes. In attendance, we have Mike Douglas and Vivian Jacques.
Well, I will initiate this, and then I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything to it, but I would want to congratulate Vivian Jacques on our operations technical assistant for the past 5+ years, and Mike Douglas, our equipment operator for 10 years of service. Oh, and do we have, is Darren here as well? I see him listed. No, okay. Darren apparently has been with us for 25 years. Well, I want to say congratulations to everyone. And I do believe that we are very fortunate in our township with the quality of staff that we have. And these are but 3 examples of that. And I think all of us should be appreciative of all the work that is being done, especially this past year, because this past year has been more challenging than most in many ways. And I just want to say thank you very much and congratulations on your anniversaries. Okay.
Thanks, guys.
We do it in council chambers, so you might as well do it on Zoom.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks, guys.
And here's me handing you your certificates, I guess.
Way to go, Mike.
Taking the picture.
Your worship, is it
Yes.
possible that Vivian could turn her camera on so we can take a photo for the newsletter?
I don't know.
There she is. Okay.
All right.
Okay, Councillor Hazelton and Councillor Cooper and Councillor Wanko, you're in this photo as well, so you might as well smile. Well done, Councillor Cooper.
Always a card.
Thank you, I have the photo.
All right, thank you very much. A little bit of entertainment to get us going in the morning. Thank you again, Mike and Vivian. All right, and I think before we get to our first delegation, Councillor Jarvis, I believe you have a bit of news to share with us.
You have some good news. We, as I mentioned yesterday, we now have a new library CEO. Should be starting on the 19th. We are very, very excited to have Sarah Papel joining us. She comes with some significant experience. Currently, she's just finishing up a term as Director of Children and Youth Services at the Aurelia Public Library. And she's been there since 2014. She has significant background in library and library sciences, comes well regarded and with very, very good reviews from those people we've talked to about her skills and her background. It's great to have her coming aboard, and I am very excited for the time ahead for the library with her on board. Things went well. I will reiterate, things went exceedingly well with Tracy and as CEO, Tracy Fisher, and we will miss her. She was a wonderful CEO for the libraries. She's moved on to a job over at the Cove. And it's great to have Sarah joining us. As I said, on the 19th, she'll be starting.
Well, thank you very much for that news. I would also like to add my congratulations and appreciation for Sarah joining us. And for those who don't know, she is a lifelong Honey Harbor cottager. My wife has known her since, I won't say the day she was born, but mighty close to it.
Not that that had any influence on her hiring.
Well, if you know, I wasn't aware that she was being hired until I was told she has been hired. So I certainly wasn't able to exercise any influence, even if I would want to, but obviously I didn't. But I'm very excited because I know she'll bring a significant amount of energy to.
Definitely great energy.
So I think that's very good news for the libraries in our township.
Here.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that. Also, Madam CAO, I believe you had some follow-up information with the one item from carryover from last night, and this was, or yesterday afternoon, I should say. It only felt like last night. And that was with regards to Councillor Hazelton's motion in support for the community at an LPAT hearing.
Yes,
And
so I have.
yesterday we left it as you were going to make some inquiries with our legal counsel.
Yep, and I have their permission to read this email, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Hello, Jessica. I would very strongly recommend against passing this resolution for a number of reasons. The resolution itself will have no effect with the tribunal. On behalf of the township, I've already specifically consented to the community group already becoming a party at the hearing. This additional resolution is unlikely to impact the tribunal's decision regarding the community group's party status. I also have concerns that the resolution implies that the township is taking the side of the community group in this appeal. While I don't think this is likely to carry any legal risk, it is politically awkward for the township to not attend and take no position on the hearing, but also to pass a resolution supporting the community group in its fight in this hearing. If the township is looking to indicate support to the community group, I would suggest that that has already happened by the township consenting to their becoming a party in the hearing.
So I'm going to put this on you, Councillor Hazelton. Given the information from our that we received from the lawyer recommending against us passing this resolution, would you like me still to call a vote on it, or would you like to withdraw it, or how would you like to respond to this new information?
I would like to let it stand, take a vote, and have a recorded vote.
Okay. Before I take that, then, would anybody else want to offer any input into this matter? We discussed it yesterday. All right. I'm just going to add my comment is I will not be voting in favor because of the advice of our lawyer, but I do not want that to be understood or by anyone or implied that I do not. I'm not against whatsoever the community fighting this on environmental grounds, because as was well reported in our various deliberations in the past, we do have environmental concerns in regard to this matter, and it's only because of the legal system and the designed by the province that I feel that we are. I'm going to use the word handcuffed. With that, would you like me to read the motion, or I guess if it's a new day, I should read the motion before Ms. Way takes the vote. It is moved by Councillor Hazelton, seconded by Councillor Wienko, whereas it has been consistently held by experts that all of the phosphorus deposited in septic systems on waterfront properties will eventually migrate into lake ecosystems and into Georgian Bay. And whereas the township's official plan prohibits the building up of shoreline elevations to permit the installation of septic systems. And whereas the Severn Sound Environmental Association has worked for many years to clean up Severn Sound, of which Honey Harbor Coastal Community is a part. And whereas the SSEA has provided targets for phosphorus levels in the waters of Severn Sound. And whereas council supports the concerns of residents in and around South Honey Harbor regarding the phosphorus loading from the installation of new septic works. And whereas the protection of the environment and human health, particularly water quality, is of paramount importance for both the council and for residents of the township. And whereas council acknowledges we face rapid change to our climate that is already having a dramatic impact on water levels, raising water levels, wave uprush, erosion, sedimentation, and other impacts. Now therefore be it resolved that the council of the township of Georgian Bay supports the community of South Honey Harbor in their representation at LPAT hearing PL 200513 as they seek to get LPAT support for their environmental concerns for the waters in and around South Honey Harbor. Ms. Way, would you be so kind as to call the vote? Or take the vote, I guess is the right term.
Let the record show that Councillor Hazelton has requested a recorded vote. Councillor Hazelton, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Jarvis, how do you vote?
No.
Councillor Wayenko, how do you vote?
No.
Councillor Bochak, how do you vote?
No.
Councillor Cooper, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mayor Kutsier, how do you vote?
No.
Let the record show the motion has been defeated.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Was there one other item that I had to bring up before we get into the delegations? I don't think so. So as it turns out, we've now reached 9:14, and I believe the first delegation is scheduled for 9:15. So I'm wondering, Ms. Way, whether our first delegators can be brought into the meeting, please.
We have Mary Muter and Dr. Pachow Fraser.
Councilor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to ask in this presentation if Dr. Pachow Fraser could just give us a bit of a summary, not just about this report, but of her experience on Georgian Bay, and the study of the wetlands. I think it would just give some context to those that are watching this presentation. Maybe her background in education and excuse me, I'm sorry. And I think it just would be give it context. So if Dr. Chow Fraser, if you could start with a little bit about yourself, I think that would be helpful to all. Thank you.
But before you begin, I would also at the same time ask that you give us more of an overview than get into the details. I'm going to cut this presentation off at 10 o'clock. That's a hard deadline simply because we have so many other delegations this morning. So I say that in advance so you won't take any offense if I cut off an enthusiastic conversation 45 minutes from now. But I just wanted to make that warning to everybody, and I'll be doing it to the other delegations as well. So with that, Councilor Cooper. Oh,
Yes, I just quickly want to say that I believe we gave this delegation, as I was told, a half an hour each. We have two presenters this morning. So we have Dr. Pachow Fraser and then Mary Muter. So they were planning to speak for 15 or 20 minutes and then have questions afterwards. So I just wanted to remind you, Mayor, of what I understand they were told. Thank you.
What I have on our agenda is the two combined have 45 minutes. All our subsequent delegates have half an hour, but Dr. Chow Fraser and Ms. Muter combined have 45 minutes on our agenda.
I'm just responding to what I was told. Thank you.
With that, Dr. Chow Fraser, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm happy to tell you a little bit more about my experience. So first of all, I'm a professor of biology at McMaster University. I have been there for 30 years or here for 30 years. I've supervised 45 graduate students, 31 I have and are currently supervising. So 31 of them are master's students and 14 are PhDs. And currently I have 3 PhDs and 7 master's students, which includes Jackie, the student who is going to be starting with me on this project. And I have supervised over 150 honors thesis students over my career. And I've published 117 papers, of which about 95 of them are on coastal wetlands in the Great Lakes system specifically. Over 2/3 of those are focused only on Georgian Bay. And I have published on papers directly related to coastal wetlands, water quality, fish, wetland mapping, indicators development. I've had grants since 2000 totaling $3.8 million that have been on projects focused on the Great Lakes Basin. Within Georgian Bay, my students and I have probably sampled over 150 wetland sites throughout the entire bay. And we have done this on multiple times from 2002 to last year, 2020. And we do a lot of work on habitat. So we study habitat of muskellunge. We look at their spawning habitat. We track them. We have studied the habitat of the young of the year, which is the most important one that is dependent on the coastal wetlands. And we've studied turtles, the at-risk turtles like blandings. And I've also developed lots of indicators based on the water quality, based on fish, based on plants. So I have also been I've also appeared at 6 different OMB hearings, which is I know no longer practiced as such, but and every one of those I have appeared as a witness, as a peer, as an expert on coastal wetlands ecology. So I hope that gives you a good idea of my qualifications. So if I could just share my screen right now, and in light of the time, I think, hang on a second. Okay, sorry, that was not the intent, sorry. Starting here. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the 2020 water quality survey that we conducted, and my co-author is Jackie, who last year was an honors thesis student. So just to remind you that I have been working with 4 historic data sets. The one that was carried out by Schaefer and Schaefer in the township of Georgian Bay between 2001 and 2009. They sampled for total coliform and E. coli. Then the Ministry of Ontario's data for the near shore between 2003 and 2005 that are primarily the total phosphorus is what I'm going to be, what we worked with. And then we also have been sampling, as I said, since 2002, we've been sampling in Georgian Bay. Specifically, the data that I have are data that we collected through the course of our work from 2003 until last year that are not necessarily specific to this project, but which I think can be used because they are TP concentrations, as well as a storm event sampling that we conducted in North Bay and South Bay. And then I was asked in December to also include data from the Severn Sound Environmental because they had been sampling since 2003 as well. So these are the locations, the regions, 12 Mile, Go Home, Cognoscine, Honey Harbor, and Oak Bay are, I'm going to keep those general regions in this presentation. Sorry. And the first thing that I want you to see is that I have the 2020 sites mapped here in the circles, and the historic sites are all these diamonds. And wanted to make sure that we had overlap geographically of all the historic data and the data we collected in 2020. And then we also wanted to, primarily what Schaefer and Schaefer did was work on these 12 Mile, Wawatasi, Go Home, Cognoscine, and so on. We wanted to establish a long-term station in Oak Bay as well. And then these are sites that are also some of the sampled sites in North Bay and South Bay were also included, even though they were not necessarily included in Schaefer and Schaefer's in a long-term basis. And so because we have so many data sets and because they were named for their particular studies, I first had to crosswalk all the stations. And that means that I had to establish boundaries, and these boundaries are quite arbitrary. They're for logistical and logical reasons, not for any kind of geomorphological or ecological reasons. The stations from the studies were all mapped together, and any stations that were found in the general vicinity were then given a new name that's a 4-digit code. And then information from all these were then combined into a GIS data set. And so this is now in the final report as an appendix. You can see that the region is named and then the site ID and then the different studies. So anybody at any point can then go to those to take a look to see if they've been sampled. So our study objectives include first to sample 38 sites across the entire region from the end of June to the end of August, 5 times to determine fecal enterococcus density. So that was the particular indicator that we were asked to use. And then for one of the objectives, I also wanted to compare the densities obtained in Honey Harbor during a storm event, as well as during fair weathers. And so what you see here are the triangles are the ones that were done in 2012, and all of the circles are the ones that were done in 2020. So the water quality guidelines for fecal enterococcus that I will, from this point on, will just refer to as FE. It's 35 geometric mean of 35 CFU or colony forming units per 100 mil of water. And that is if you have at least 5 samples throughout the season. If you only have a single sample, then it's 104. So this is for recreational use, which includes swimming and anything that would be contact. So the first thing, the good news is that in 2020, during the fair weather sampling, we did not find very, very high counts, and none of them exceeded either the single sample or the geometric mean. Most of them were in the sort of either not present or between 1 and 2. But we did have some counts that were higher. If you compare this to the storm event sampling that we did in 2012, you can see that the fecal Enterococcus levels went up to in excess of 600. And so there were definitely, these levels that we're seeing in 2020 are definitely a lot lower than those storm events that we sampled in 2012. And just this is a close-up of the areas where they had been sampled to be high during the 2012 events. And you can't see, but 60% was calculated to be the number of samples that exceeded the 104 single sample guideline. And in fact, 20% had exceeded 300 CFUs. So here we see a summary of the 2012 during storm event as well as during sunny weather. So you can see that during the sunny weather, they're actually not much different than the green, the bar for 2020. It's the storm event that actually where we see these very, very high levels of fecal Enterococcus. We can also look at the percentage of times out of the 5 sampling dates where we had positive Enterococcus. And so these data are from 0, which is basically just open, all the way to 75 or 100% of the time, which are these red numbers. I apologize in advance to people who are challenged by colors. This was a presentation that was developed without that, without having considered that in the beginning. This is the Go Home Bay area where we had, every time that we went there were positive counts. Another one was in the Honey Harbor area, and then Macy Bay. And then we also had sampled Oak Bay, where between 50 and 75% of the time, we also found high counts. So the third study objective is to determine long-term trends in E. coli at 31 sites. And so these are, again, you can see that the square is the 2009 data, the circle is the 2020 data, and the distribution. The water quality guidelines for E. coli is for a geometric mean of 200 CFU per 100 mils, or for a single sample, 400. And then Carl Schaefer also proposed a guideline of 10 CFU of E. coli per 100 mil for Georgian Bay to better reflect the pristine background conditions. So the good news is that none of the sites had seasonal mean densities in 2009 that exceeded 200 CFUs, and 67% were below the 10 CFU, which means that a third of them were actually above. So for the E. coli that were sampled in 2009 at least 5 times, you can see that the highest, the region with the highest number was 22 in Honey Harbor, and then Cognachine with 11. Go Home Bay had a mean of 13. 12 Mile with Wawatezi had a mean of 3. And and if you compare that to 2020, where they were only sampled 1 or 2 times, and recall the reason why this is the case is because we were actually asked to use the fecal Enterococcus as the indicator. So we only had time to do this a couple of times for E. coli. of the sites that we visited for the E. coli comparison, really there are 3 places in Cognition and Go Home Bay that really were quite high relative to the guidelines that were set for Georgian Bay. Honey Harbor was only slightly elevated. So the direct comparison of sites sampled in both 2009 and 2020 in the same month. So recall that we had means presented. So what I wanted to do now is just look at data that were collected in July. And you can see here the 2009 much higher than 2020. In August is a little bit more equivocal, where we had 1 sample. And this one was very, very minor, but this one in this area was actually higher in 2020 than 2009. But in general, we can see that they are much lower in 2020 compared to 2009. And then the fourth objective is to measure the TP concentrations whenever we had anything positive in terms of fecal bacteria. And this again was because of COVID. We were restricted to access to our lab, and so we had to curtail some of the things we wanted to do. And so we were also asked to analyze historical data that were collected by the SSEA, compare it to the current data. So the Seventh Sound Environmental collected in 3 different stations within Honey Harbor and North Bay and South Bay. And these are the data that are collected since, these are all data that collected since 2003. I just made them into monthly dates. And so these are the standard error bars of all of the times when they were collected. And so the main takeaway from here is that there is no real consistency in terms of where the maximum for TP during the season occurs. But between June and August seems to be a reasonably good and consistent. So that is the time when they should be collected. But if you take a look at all of this, the data for all months, and then look at the trends through time in year, you can see that we have generally decreasing, and then it started to increase again. And then we have this, this general direction towards lower concentrations between 2014 and 2019. So just keep this in mind. What we saw now in 2020, and again, these are only samples that we collected whenever there were positive fecal contamination. And we can see that these are data from my studies, and you can see that we sampled across these various sites. The first thing to note is that in Oak Bay, this is 1203, in Oak Bay, we did not manage to sample again in this area specifically. We sampled in other areas, but not in this particular area. So it was very high in 2004. It would have been nice to see how high it is now and in the intermediate times. But what we do see is if we take a look at the 1205 and 1206, which are within the Potato Island wetland, as well as in the outlet, you can see that the concentrations have increased quite a bit. And these are, these contrast the trends that we had seen in other sites where the 2020, 2019 sites are actually lower. So I want to address this right now. First, I want to just show you, these are data from the MOE study between 2003 and 2005. These are data that are not necessarily specific to to Georgian Bay, the township, these had been collected throughout, and all I did was I took data that were within the township near shore zone. You can see that for the most part they were less than 10, but within the sites in North Bay, South Bay, in Oak Bay, concentrations of phosphorus were between 10 and 20. Okay, so we know, so there are two things to take away is that Honey Harbor and Oak Bay, even in the earlier years before now, have been higher compared to the rest of the near shore in the township. And if we look at all of the data from all of the years, now we can see that there are differences on a regional basis. You can see that there's quite erratic. Again, these are corresponding to the Oak Bay in 2019. These are, Honey Harbor is almost uniformly fairly high, right above the 10 micrograms per liter, which brings it into the mesotrophic. This dotted line on the top would mean that it would be eutrophic. And you can see that in Go Home, one of the sites in 2020 had actually exceeded that. And then also there was one in 12 Mile region. And so we've been seeing this trend towards lower concentrations between 2014 and 2020. And so we actually just published a study on this, looking at the effects of water level on water quality. And the higher the water levels, the higher the water volume that dilute the nutrients and suspended solids. So it's just a simple matter of having this concentrated in lower water levels and diluted when it's high. So we have a situation where if you are just comparing TP concentrations or any other kind of concentration, suspended solids or E. coli, you may be tempted to think that conditions have actually gotten better, but in fact, they've only just been diluted out. So our proposal going forward is to select 50 stations, including any of the problem areas that we noted in this study, in the 5 regions to survey for E. coli, and to do this only during the fair weather conditions, and to do a direct comparison between the E. coli and the fecal enterococcus for a subset of these sites, and to do this during only fair weather. And then to conduct a direct comparison between E. coli that we measured, which is using a TECTA, and the coloplate method that is that volunteers can use. And this is going forward, we want to be able to compare our data with anything else that people might collect from a volunteer program. I would also like to repeat the storm event sampling in Honey Harbor using the fecal enterococcus only, so that we can compare it against the 2012. Also want to measure TP at all of the sites each time that we go out. And also, in particular, focus on areas such as Macy Bay and Oak Bay and Honey Harbor, as well as some of the sites in Go Home. And then potentially conduct a pilot program to see if we can measure periphyton that are growing on artificial substrates in the nearshore area in these problem areas. I just want to briefly mention that we also have developed a remote sensing approach to identify vernal pools. And we've started to do that for the Georgian Bay. This has been published in the Canadian Journal of Remote Sensing. These vernal pools are really important because we have species at risks, like the Jeffersons and the Blandings turtles using them. And so I just want to mention that the model that was developed for Georgian Bay, we're only using freely available satellite data and orthophotos with an accuracy of above 80%, which is very acceptable. And we validated last fall with 38 sites within the township and also got an accuracy of over 80%. This can really be improved with LiDAR data. And the idea is that we want to go forward with having the classified vernal pools superimpose the building footprint and looking at the forested areas, and then doing a selective ground truthing. This model was tested out in a project by one of my students, Grace Luke Howell. And what we did was we mapped the potential vernal pools in the study area. This is entire Muskoka district. We've also taken building densities, and to just show you what we would like to do in the future is we did this pilot project where we took a hexagon of 1 kilometer and then measured the amount of forested area in each, the vernal pool densities, these are potential vernal pools, and then the building densities. And then we came up with relationships and found that the vernal pool areas were reduced as a function of building density. So what we have done is now identified vulnerable vernal pools, and those can then be preferentially field truth validated so that we can then target them for field mapping before any construction takes place. So I want to thank the councilors Peter Cooper and Al Hazelton for helping us to choose sites last year, people that helped transport us to the sites, and cottagers in the area that helped us by letting us stay at the cottage, use their docks, boats, and so on. And I will stop now, and I think we can have people, Mary, should we continue on or have questions at this point?
I'll just advise that we have 17 minutes remaining. Councilor Wienke, you had a question?
I had a couple of questions. I'm just wondering, is it possible when you're doing your bacteria work to relate it to a particular problem? Like, for example, you're finding problems at marinas and so on. Well, we're finding the same issues on the inland lakes. Most of our high E. coli values are from the marinas and landings and areas where there is geese. And I would not be surprised if you went to Oak Bay, there's probably a relationship between the high E. coli values and the geese problem they have at Oak Bay. So there may be a relationship there, and also wetlands. So we always find higher values close to wetlands, which would be natural E. coli values. So it would be nice if you could relate it to the source of these E. coli, because basically, as you say, it's determined the swimmability of water, and people don't swim, hopefully don't swim near marinas and wetlands. They're usually out in the pristine lakes, and that's where you really want to find out if you have high values. And on your total phosphorus information.
Can I answer that right now? I mean, I'd like to address that about the source. Yeah, so so I do actually have this year, when we find samples that are contaminated, I do actually now have a relationship with one of the professors within our own department, where he has microbe source tracking capabilities, and he said that he would do that for us. So we can determine whether it's human source. He's doing it with molecular source tracking. And it's
I think you'll find the ones that Oak Bay is probably related to the geese problem they have. And just one issue, you are finding some high total phosphorus values in the Oak Bay area. If you're going to be doing a total phosphorus at Oak Bay, can you also put a sample site up by the outlet from Gloucester Pool? Because in Gloucester Pool, at the outlet to the Severn Sound, we had a value this year of 23 micrograms of total phosphorus. So that's pretty high. So the values you're getting at Oak Bay may be coming from the Gloucester Pool. water and not necessarily Oak Bay. So just maybe you can have a sample site up by Gloucester Pool might explain the values around Oak Bay. Thank you.
Sure, yeah, we can do that. There are also some control sites in Oak Bay that are not near the development area, so we have also got those.
Councillor Cooper, followed by Councillor Bocek, followed by Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, Mayor Kutzier and Dr. Pachow Fraser. Excellent presentation. Just from a practical perspective, with respect to Gloucester Pool, you don't have a boat in Gloucester Pool, whereas everywhere else on Georgian Bay, you have access either through one boat or another. So if you're going to spend some time in Gloucester Pool, you're going to need some help from that community to be able to get there. I just wanted to ask a couple of quick questions. One came up yesterday with respect to the area that you're going to use in Honey Harbor under where the library was. And there was a concern that there might be chlorine used to clean the equipment, which would end up in the septic system in Honey Harbor at that facility. I think that was really the concern that was raised by Councillor Wianco and Bocek. So can you comment on cleaning the test tubes and use of chlorine? And then I have one other quick question.
Yes. We were concerned about that as well, even when we were in Jean's cottage. So all of the samples that we are poured into a container. So we have basically gallon jars that we put all the rinse water into that, and anything that we use to kill the bacteria right after the testing are poured into a gallon jar, basically, and then brought back to McMaster for disposal. And we don't put anything into the trash or into the drains other than the water, like sample water that we have.
Thank you for that. And I think that was our expectation, that we'd be very careful. Sorry, the second thing was when you talked about a storm event, I just want to understand what you mean by a storm event. This isn't a windstorm, I wouldn't think. I imagine it's a rainstorm, a heavy rainstorm, where the land base is washed out in effect and into the water of Georgian Bay. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. Yes, I should have verified it is a rain event, and it basically from the weather forecast, something big is going to come, from satellite, and then we have to prepare for it, because if a rainstorm occurs and it's a very high intensity, that takes place over 2 hours or something like that, then we're not going to be able to catch that. We might catch the aftermath, but there are storms that happen, through the course of a day, for instance, and you accumulate a certain millimeters. Those would be perfect timing for us to go and actually sample during the storm.
Sorry, one final quick thing is that you mentioned LiDAR data that you've been using, which is a type of satellite imagery, I understand.
No, we haven't got that yet.
You haven't got it, and
we would like it.
Right, and I think just to inform our council, the District of Muskoka has been urged rather strongly to provide LiDAR data for coastal Georgian Bay. In fact, we've also encouraged them to get what is called bathymetric LiDAR information, which is underwater. In other words, we can even tell water depth. Imagine that. Pretty exciting stuff. So I'm hopeful that we can use that so that we can understand what's going on in fish habitats, etc. Thank you. And I would comment that as we're running very short on time, that I'm going to ask that we have more questions for Mary Muter, and but we may have to reschedule, because if we can't let her give her full presentation, I would say that's a problem. Thank you.
In that regard, I mean, I don't set the agenda, but I'm assigned to keep the agenda, and I thought that there would be one combined presentation based on what I saw on the agenda, and I didn't realize there would be two separate presentations. But I think we have to, unfortunately, I think we should stick to the schedule because we have so many other people in line waiting. Having said that, Councilor Bocek, I believe you had a question.
Yes, not really a question, but simply a comment, and my only one of the morning during these delegations, and that is that to Dr. Patchow Fraser, we really appreciated your unbiased and trusted voice on these matters, and you really are probably our best resource for water quality in our area of Georgian Bay, and I just wanted to thank you for your work and your team's work as well. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Jarvis, you had your hand up as well.
Yeah, just a quick question for Patchow Fraser. You mentioned the term paraphytes.
Fine.
Your definition, if you don't mind. I wasn't
Sorry, it's the algae that grow on substrate, so rocks and plants and things. They're not the algae in the water, they're algae that grow on the substrate. Yeah.
Onward we go.
All right, I'm afraid we only have 8 minutes left. So Ms. Muter, I think probably what's, in fairness to you, the best thing to do is if we schedule a delegation for you in the following meeting, because obviously 8 minutes would be totally unfair to you.
I think that's correct.
And I apologize for the misunderstanding. Say I was under the impression that the two of you were giving a delegation, and therefore when I saw 45 minutes, I figured that allowed enough time with some questions. And obviously that wasn't what was intended. So again, my apologies.
I wanted to connect the water quality to wetlands and water levels, and I think that's an important connection to make. So yeah, I have 20 minutes that I put together of slides. I don't think I can do this in this short period of time.
No. So I'm hoping you will indulge us and come back maybe next month and we'll give you a full delegation slot so that you can make your presentation and give us time for questions.
Yes, I will agree with that. Thank you.
I really appreciate your cooperation. I'm sorry we got you in this situation. There must have been some misunderstanding, a couple of misunderstandings, I think, here, how the whole thing worked out.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any more questions for Dr. Chow Fraser? Seeing none, I want, Councillor Cooper, under the wire there.
Just to echo what Councillor Bocek said, and thank you very much, Dr. Fraser, Chow Fraser, for the work that you do. It's critical for us, and I think the more depth that you're getting into each year you come, you're using new equipment, and I mean the equipment you had last year, as I understand it, McMaster paid something like 25 or 30,000 or something, 40,000, I guess it was, for a machine that helped to do your work. It's really remarkable the amount of value that we are getting for what the Township of Georgian Bay is investing in your program. So very exciting stuff. And if we can get this LiDAR mapping from the district, the bathymetric, there we go, bathymetric LiDAR from the district, that's going to be really exciting information for us, especially I'm sure as it pertains to wetlands, but also other matters that we're trying to consider from a planning perspective. So thank you for all of that you do.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Okay. Councillor Hazelton, I see your hand waving.
Thank you. And again, Dr. Patchow Fraser, thank you for your presentation and all the work you do. You focused today mostly on water sampling and so on, but we know that you've done an extensive amount of studies in wetlands and fish habitat up and down the bay. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, just to ask, are you going to be doing any additional work in those areas this year or next year, or what are your plans?
Yes, in fact, we are going to be surveying the sites in Severn Sound, sort of north to Beausoleil. all for muskie young of the year habitat. So this was work that started in 1981 by Ministry of Natural Resources. We resampled them in 2007, 2012, and just recently, for the first time in 30 years, we've now found young of the year again with the rising water levels. We predicted we would see them again, so we saw these juveniles. So that's very exciting for us because we weren't able to see them at all for 30 years. So we're doing it again this year. We're also doing some more mapping with also underwater cameras to capture the fish movement rather than, because the water is so high, although it has dropped quite a bit from last year. But last year we couldn't set the nets. The water was so high that we couldn't set the nets. So there's no way for us to sample the same areas that we had sampled before because of the high water. So this year we're putting in some camera traps, and we had a ROV, underwater remote operated vehicle that were used to take videos of the areas to see the fish. So we see them, they're still there, but the underwater, jungle is very different. It's because they're dead trees and, sedges and things like that shouldn't be there. And because the water is so high.
Councillor Bocek, one last question to you.
And this is a question, Dr. Patchow-Fraser, have you taken over the program from Aruna Slaskowski in the trap netting through the MNR? Is that now a program under your auspice?
No. Nobody can ever take over from Arunas.
No, I agree.
He is definitely an institution. No, he and we are actually working together up in the Key River. So they're going to be setting trap nets and we're setting our fyke nets, and then we're going to see how the fish are moving between different districts. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Muter, I see your hand.
I just want to mention, Pat didn't mention, but she's going to be doing research using new satellite imagery to assess wetlands during the high water level period. So, and we have partnered with MyTax, so that's federal and provincial funding. We're matching that funding. And Pat, I don't know if you can describe that quickly.
Yeah, so basically we did a whole survey of all the wetlands in Georgian Bay coast and the eastern coast in 2002, 2003. That was with the GBF Foundation. And now we're redoing that basically with new LiDAR data, new satellite data for the entire stretch so that we can compare that with in high water and then in low water. And nobody else has done that at all, not even the Environment Canada.
Well, I'm going to say thank you very much. I'm afraid I have to cut it off at this point, but I'm sure you can understand that all council is very appreciative of your coming to our meeting this morning and sharing this information with you. It's obviously of the highest quality and very interesting, and I think the Bay is better for it. And so I want to say thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Ms. Way, can you do your juggling of participants?
So next we have Kevin Boyle from the District of Muskoka.
Mr. Boyle, welcome to the Township of Georgian Bay. And I believe you want to talk to us a little bit about climate change.
I do. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm just going to try to share my screen here and hopefully it goes smoothly, if that's all right. All right. Now, can you see my screen there?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. All right. Let's see if I can put this in full screen mode. That's going to be. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and to Council for having me here today to talk about a new leaf, Muskoka's climate strategy. I'm happy to present to the Township of Georgian Bay on our climate strategy. I always see the Township of Georgian Bay really has taken a leadership role in the fight for climate change in Muskoka, and I've always sort of looked off to the west and been, just very sort of amazed at what you guys have accomplished. So I wanted to say thank you for that. I also wanted to take a moment to thank our steering committee that helped put together our climate strategy and climate plans, as well as a special thank you to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, Municipalities for Climate Innovation Program, which provided a grant that covered a portion of my salary for the last 2 years to develop this plan. So the Muskoka's climate strategy is a set of integrated actions which is intended to increase the district's resiliency to climate change impacts, as well as decrease our emissions. Just want to make sure, you seeing the second slide there?
Yes.
Excellent, thanks. And our climate strategy is comprised of 6 pillars. So we have what we call our MCAP, which is our Muskoka Climate Change Action Plan, which is a corporate climate change adaptation and mitigation plan. So that's focused on district fleet, buildings, and district activities. Then we have 2 different greenhouse gas initiatives going on. One is a corporate greenhouse gas review, and that is beyond the mitigation actions that are contained in our action plan, which are the sort of simple ones, the green fleet assessment, the efficiencies. That's where we really want to look at more specifically at our processes in our high energy users, like our wastewater facilities, to see what efficiencies could be found. Number 3, which I'm really excited about, is as you may or may not know, that we're part of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Partners for Climate Protection program as well. We joined after Georgian Bay did. We're doing a Muskoka-wide greenhouse gas inventory. We were awarded milestone 1 for both corporate and community back in November, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about it later in this presentation, but that is one of the exciting projects that's coming up. To round out the strategy, we also have outreach and education, of course, partnerships, and then seeking and securing funds to facilitate some of these projects like floodplain mapping, which was mentioned earlier. So with our partnerships, we partner with the Watershed Council, of course, Climate Action Muskoka, Muskoka Steamship Discovery Center, the Health Unit, Dorset Environmental Science on a number of different projects. And also, of course, we partner with the Georgian Bay Biosphere as well, and we were at the recent IceCap meeting. On the education front, we're actually launching a speaker series on Earth Day that's free through the Muskoka Steamship Discovery Center. And that'll be 6 consecutive weeks of talks around climate change and the environment, kicking off with the former Environmental Commissioner Diane Sachs on Thursday, April 22nd, starting at 5, and moving on from there. We're also developing curriculum-based education programs for students, a road salt sampling program, and a number of other initiatives around education, as well as continuing partnerships. Now, of course, funding is key as well. And the way we've designed our corporate climate change action plan and our climate strategies is that the actions are built in a flexible way where we can pursue and prioritize actions based on funding. So floodplain mapping, which is one that I know came up in the presentation previous that we'll touch on briefly. But I wanted to go back to the beginning. My role started in, I guess it would have been September of 2018, but the climate work at the district through senior leadership in our council started long before that. And so really the core of all of our new strategy goes back to our official plan, our strategic priorities, and a lot of the activities happened before I even started that set the pace for where we are today. So what is the Muskoka Climate Change Action Plan? And what does it actually do in practice? Well, the MCAP is a detailed report that contains a number of actions and recommendations. These include, but aren't limited to, doing vulnerability assessments of district building and infrastructure. That could be specifically looking at stormwater infrastructure with the anticipated increases in precipitation, maybe measuring your IDFs or intensity, duration, frequency to make sure that our culvert sizing is appropriate, and make changes on those long-term assets based on the increase in precipitation if necessary. It could be assessing risks to District Muskoka buildings, not just flooding, but of course, we know that extreme heat generally impacts vulnerable populations much more. So knowing that we have 500 social housing units, many of which don't have air conditioning units or long-term care facilities without such. I know when I moved up to Muskoka about 4 years ago, I never really thought about having an air conditioner, but now every summer it creeps into my head. We also are pursuing renewable energy projects. The Golden Pheasant is kicking off soon. That's a project that is a $1.8 million solar project at one of our wastewater facilities. And the thing I love about projects like that is it's anticipated to pay off the $1.8 million capital cost with interest within 10 years. And then over its 20-year lifespan, generate $5 million in revenue. And on top of that, it's expected to offset about 500 tons of CO2 a year. So really a win-win. Other things in our plan are increasing our sustainability or apply actions that would help the district and our community respond to and recover from extreme weather events. That could be tracking damage from flood and extreme weather for use in grants like the National Disaster Mitigation Program. It could be using our existing systems more consistently across the district, like 511 for road closed, so we have better regional alignment. And that information, of course, is extremely helpful with grants as well. Now, in order to implement a large plan like this, the idea is not to do it all at once. The idea is we're meeting with sort of individual departments and then seeking guidance from, of course, council and senior leadership. And we'll be able to prioritize the actions that work with our current staffing and budget levels. And then we'll also be able to identify other actions that maybe have different budget requirements or require more staff resource or staff time. And then certainly projects that just won't happen now. These plans, as you guys know, are very big. And so really prioritizing and strategically going after grants to action on the goals and actions that you really want to achieve that are your priorities is something that we're looking to do. We, of course, have a number of actions already underway. We completed our floodplain mapping project, of course, which was launched with our new GeoHub. Hopefully everyone's got a chance to see that. We recently just upgraded that with live water levels for lakes in Muskoka, so that you can actually see from anywhere in the world what the level on the major lakes where it's available is. And certainly we're working towards trying to get that same data for Georgian Bay as well. We also have our greenhouse gas project. We'll be launching or sending out invites to join a community working group soon. We're working on fleet management and a green fleet assessment. And certainly we're targeting more grants. We also did just write another floodplain mapping grant in November, and that was selected by the MMAH to go on for federal consideration. We have not heard back from that yet, unfortunately. And so in order to, if you want to read our MCAP, it's available on our website. And we're just developing a new section of our website that hopefully will have a lot of resources that are useful for businesses, for chambers, or for individuals to improve their own carbon footprint or increase the resiliency. But on there at the end of our plan, which is a bit of a long document, there's a large table that breaks down all of the actions with timelines, anticipated costs, status, so that you can easily go through and look at the different actions and then determine who's responsible, if it's underway, and so on and so forth. And now I wanted to talk just briefly about our greenhouse gas initiative. So for the district as well as for the community, we've now got our baseline greenhouse gas, and we're looking to create the community-wide reduction strategy. To achieve this, we are going to form a community working group, and invitations will start to go out around Earth Day. And what we're trying to do is get a representative snapshot of the Muskoka communities. That would be utilities, it would be chambers of commerce, it would be representatives from area municipalities, it would be groups like Watershed Council or Climate Action Muskoka, and they'll be tasked with the help of our consultant and of course district staff to develop the greenhouse gas reduction strategy for the community in Muskoka. So we're sort of really excited about that, and we're excited to send out our invitations sort of later on this month. And so why develop a greenhouse gas baseline? I think probably in this room, I don't really need to answer that question because I think you're a little ahead of that. But of course, it's hard to manage what you don't measure. Having this information means we know where our emissions come from, how much emissions we create, and very important, how much we spend on those emissions and where. And that means that we can now target strategies and actions that will not only reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which we know is the right thing to do, but we're also looking to create efficiencies and save money whenever possible. This approach aligns with our official plan, strategic priorities, and follows the best and sort of most recent science. There we go. So in conclusion, I just wanted to say that, One of the things that we're trying to do now as we work on implementing our plan is to target and prioritize actions that not only have a benefit for the district, but could also have a benefit for our municipal partners. So where possible, we'll either partner on actions, or if it's something simple like a cost benefit analysis on a simple EV car versus a combustion engine runabout, you do the math on a 10-year asset and it's usually almost always cheaper to buy the EV. So things like that, or a green fleet assessment, or if we do a deep dive look at culvert size and IDF curves, those are all actions that can certainly help our area municipal partners, as well as continuing to pursue projects like our floodplain mapping project. Like I said, it was passed on for federal consideration, and we were very excited about that. Unfortunately, we have not heard from the federal government any news on that. The start date for that was supposed to be April 1st, so federal funding and start dates sometimes misalign, which is unfortunate. But certainly with that floodplain mapping, if possible, given the tight timeline, one of the things we wanted to prioritize was, as I think I heard it mentioned earlier, was getting more LiDAR in the Georgian Bay area. And so we'll have to see what the outcome of that floodplain mapping project is. But I should also mention that there is also the Muskoka Watershed Conservation Management Initiative and the 13 recommendations that came out that included some other flood mitigation and flood mapping as well. So certainly, hopefully we can approach both avenues, but certainly there'll be more data coming in the future. And we look forward to working with Georgian Bay and to following their lead on the climate front. With that, I would like to say thank you and open it for any questions.
Mr. Boyle, thank you very much. You condensed quite a lot of information into the 12 minutes you were speaking to us. Councillor Cooper, I see your electronic hand up.
Thank you, Mayor Coetzee and Kevin. Great presentation. I've been fortunate to listen to you a few times now. Just a couple of quick comments. I really liked a couple of things that you said. One which was sort of an old worked or overworked phrase perhaps, but it's hard to manage what you don't measure. So I think that's pretty critical in a lot of things that we do, and I encourage you to follow that path. But also, just in terms of floodplain mapping and LiDAR, you've touched on that a couple of times, and the degree of interest. I don't know whether you sat through some of our presentation just prior to yours. You were in through that, and so I take a great deal of interest in this, and I have raised the issue on more than one occasion, and I do believe that your work and the work of the district around some of the things that you presented this morning I realize you've got an ask out to the feds, but did we not get funding provincially that is going to help us with our work? And it was quite a significant amount of money. Could you comment on that? And then I have one other little quick comment.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Cooper. So certainly with floodplain mapping, I did write a grant that was for the National Disaster Mitigation Program intake number 6. So that was the one that I was referring to that was selected by Ministry of Municipal Affairs to be passed on for federal consideration. So that one's in the queue waiting. But also the province did, and I don't know all of the details around this, but the province did commit to funding the Muskoka 13 of the 19 recommendations that came from the Muskoka Watershed Advisory Group. And of those recommendations, 2 relating to flooding, I believe. One was around flood mitigation and the other one was around floodplain mapping. And so that would be separate completely from the federal grant that we applied for. How that is being allocated or how that floodplain mapping project is moving forward, I'm not entirely sure. You'll have to, I'm not sure if the details have been released yet. I know we're frantically working to sort out all the agreements with the province. But certainly it means that we have 2 different floodplain mapping opportunities in front of us. And so I would certainly hope that, we would try to spread that out in all the highest risk areas and include Georgian Bay.
So
now, unfortunately, I don't have the details on that program, though, Councillor Cooper. But it is there. It has been funded.
Yes, I realize that it's still sort of in a fledgling stage, and that the funding until very recently wasn't even sort of public knowledge. And I'm not trying to spill the beans here. I just wanted to sort of generally say that it looks like there's going to be some really cool funding. And I wanted to talk specifically about floodplain mapping and the LiDAR mapping, and just remind you, but I've also reminded Christy Doyle, and I hope many of our councillors will remind us that, well, we don't have regular flooding on Georgian Bay. We have long-term flooding on Georgian Bay. And we have a swing of 6.5 feet. That's pretty incredible. And nothing like a 2 or 3 foot flood like we've seen in the worst of times in the district inland. So I just wanted to say that we have some real needs, and we have huge wetlands that will also benefit from some of this information. And the final thing I would like to put in front is that, and I've suggested this to the GeoHub folks, that would be really helpful for your floodplain mapping and also for ours if you did bathymetric LiDAR. I don't know whether you're aware of that, but bathymetric LiDAR is basically another special camera. When you're flying around anyway, you put this camera in place and you can actually shoot underwater. So you get water depths. And that plays a role in flooding in Muskoka, but would also play a role in Georgian Bay with wetlands and flooding, long-term flooding, shall we say, that kind of thing. So I just wanted to urge you, and I have been urging Christy Doyle and Samantha Hastings, et cetera, that this is very important. Thank you.
And thank you very much. Anyone else? Any questions for Mr. Boyle? You got them dumbfounded. Well done.
I think I could go home now, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, you may. I'm sure you have more than enough work to do and other presentations to be prepared for. So we greatly appreciate you coming.
Well, and maybe just, Mr. Mayor, one more comment just on Pete, Councillor Cooper's comment there. I am very aware of bathymetric LiDAR, and I know Christy is, and Graham Good, our geomatics coordinator. And certainly when it comes to the federal grant, we'll have to see what's possible, and we'll work with the current floodplain mapping models that we have. I just don't know those technical questions, but certainly if it works with the models we have and we can get it done in the time, it would be something that we would look at very closely, because I can see the value in it. And I did really think that was a great presentation you guys just had. So thank you very much for having me. And
well,
certainly if there's any other questions, you can reach out to me directly and I will respond in time.
We know where you work. Thank you very much again. We appreciate it.
Have a great day.
So Ms. Way, I know that our next couple of presenters are already on your list waiting in line. So I think maybe if we can move to Ms. Roxborough in keeping an almost consistent theme here.
Absolutely. There she is.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect.
Welcome to the Township of Georgian Bay for this morning's meeting. And if Ms. Schneier, are you just waving, or are you wanting to attract my attention?
Oh, just waving at Tracy.
Okay. So Ms. Roxborough, you're going to present on sustainability and climate change, I imagine.
I am. So thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Your worship, members of council, staff, and members of the public. Just to quickly introduce myself, my name is Tracy Roxborough. I'm the Sustainability and Climate Action Coordinator with Severn Sound Environmental Association. And I'm here today to speak to you specifically about the Sustainable Severn Sound Special Project and the progress that your municipality has made in your commitment to climate action. So my thanks and recognition in advance to Councillor Wienko, who supports our work as a member of our board of directors, and to your staff, such as Jen, hi, and partners in the audience, such as Kevin, that I've been fortunate to work and collaborate with on this work. So today I'm going to go over who we are and how we work to support our member municipalities in reference to both SSEA and the SSS Special Project. The need for and the value of local climate action by your municipality, which obviously has already been touched on today from some of the presentations. A timeline of the progress and achievements that your municipality has made in connection to your federal Partners for Climate Change Protection Program. And I would be happy to answer any questions you may have at the end of the presentation today. So just a quick introduction to SSEA, of course, for council and of course for maybe members that are attending who are not familiar with us. Since 2009, we have been a joint municipal services board established in agreement with our 8 member municipalities under the Municipal Act. So instead of each municipality in the watershed having a separate board to manage environmental issues, the SSEA was established to gain efficiency by sharing collective resource. As I mentioned, we are guided by the SSEA's board of directors and our executive director, whom reports to that board, comprised of council members from those 8 member municipalities. So our service area is the Severn Sound watershed, which spans 100,000 kilometers squared from Tiny to Georgia Bay, from Orvidante and Springwater in the south. So we do have 7 full-time and 3 part-time contract staff, which provide our members with a diverse set of skills and expertise. Some of those services include water quality and quantity monitoring, municipal planning support, citizen science programs, invasive species management, tree planting and tree distribution program, and to which I am here to speak to you today, our climate change action program, including the Partners for Climate Protection Program membership support services, climate plan implementation support, and greenhouse gas analysis and reporting. So in my role as the sustainability coordinator, a sustainability and climate action coordinator with SSEA, I'm responsible for the management of the Sustainable Severn Sound Special Project. That project has a goal to advance the adoption of practices by our municipal partners that will result in greenhouse gas reduction or mitigation. So my work in this position has involved the preparation of the Collaborative Regional Scope Climate Plan, also called the Local Climate Change Action Plan, or LCAP. I also support our 6 PCP member municipalities in their membership in the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Partners for Climate Change Protection Program. And we also support the implementation of your municipal climate plan to deliver on that PCP membership commitment. So again, this has already been spoken to, but of course there's financial and environmental benefits. So taking action on greenhouse gas reduction projects can reduce energy and greenhouse gas emissions, result in cost savings for your municipality, for your residents, and a return on investment for your original contributions. As Kevin had noted in his presentation, with the district receiving that payback and return on their investment with their wastewater treatment project. As well, municipal governments are fundamental to achieving local greenhouse gas emission reductions, since you have a significant impact on the development and the land use decisions that shape the pattern of growth and energy use within your communities. So it is widely accepted to some level that some level of climate change is inevitable and is already, of course, occurring. So Canada's Change in Climate Report, led by Environment and Climate Change Canada, confirms that Canada's climate will continue to warm in all seasons. So other changes in climate are also projected to increase with further warming, such as increases in extreme heat, increases in total and extreme precipitation, and a decline in snow and ice cover. So these trends will have varying impacts, but all will include impacts on the environment, people, health, and the economy. This makes it increasingly important for municipalities to incorporate climate change considerations in their decision-making processes and to decrease the greenhouse gas emissions that, of course, do drive climate change. So I'm going to skip the first 2 and go on to the last one. I wanted to share with you some Port Severn specific data that can be accessed through climatedata.ca. So this is a tool developed between Environment Climate Change Canada and the Computer Research Institute of Montreal and other agencies, with the intention to make climate data easily accessible and available for all. So please visit the site. It is fairly simple to navigate. So here I'm just going to look specifically, if you can see, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but these different lines on the chart represent different possible carbon emission pathways or representative carbon pathways and future predictions and climate models. Of course, the red line going up is the extreme warming. Green is medium, so assuming that we take some actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And the blue, of course, being a low emission scenario. So looking at, for example, days with the temperature over 30 degrees Celsius. Pardon me. So for example, in 2030, we can look at approximately 18 days in which the temperature exceeds 30 degrees Celsius. Compare that to 2010. There were 9 in that year that the temperature exceeded 30 degrees Celsius. In 2022, we can expect 14 days exceeding that 30 degrees Celsius mark. And in 2050, we can expect 23 days that the temperature would then increase that 30-degree Celsius mark. And of course, this is the green line, so representing that medium carbon concentration in our atmosphere. So you can likely understand the impacts that would be associated with these sustained extreme temperatures. Some that could potentially occur, including drier, dustier conditions, potential air quality concerns, longer weather suitability for invasive pests and plants, changes in water quality, staff impacts, for example, working out of doors, and health and safety, plus others. So how did we start working with you on climate action planning? So in 2018, your township did join the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, ICLEI Canada, Partners for Climate Change Protection Program through a council resolution as recommended by SSS and the then Sustainability Committee. So the PCP program itself consists of a 5-step milestone framework that guides you as you take action against climate change by reducing emissions in your municipality. This program has over 450 municipal members across Canada. PCP membership is free and gives you access to tools, case studies, and other information resources, as well as support from the PCP Secretariat, all which is regularly accessed by SSS. So this program has been proven to result in greenhouse gas emissions, cost savings, and more sustainable communities by these municipalities who complete the program. And of course, at this point, you have achieved milestone 1, 2, and 3, and are, as I noted there, you are here implementing your local action plan. So I wanted to put together kind of a summary of where you've been and where you are now. To summarize the progress that you've made, I will start with 2017 when we received funding to create the region's first municipally led climate action plan. As part of that process, we did host over 10 community events, including one in McTier, one in Port Severn. We provided over 30 presentations to councils, community groups, businesses, and other stakeholders to acquire feedback and comments. In 2018, we did release that regional climate plan at a community barbecue and recognized our PCP members through a formal presentation from FCM at your staff that your staff were present at. After that, we then secured additional funding from FCM through their Municipalities for Climate Innovation program to progress our 6 partner municipalities through the PCP program milestones. So with that funding, we then prepared your greenhouse gas baseline inventory, which allowed you to achieve milestone 1. And then as part of milestone 2, we researched corporate and community greenhouse gas reduction targets across the province and requested feedback or review by your municipal staff. We then worked to prepare your municipal climate plan, which was presented to your staff at a management team meeting, reviewed, and then presented to council, where you then adopted that plan to achieve milestone 2 and 3 in November 2019. And then that plan was submitted to FCM for approval. So in terms of where are we now, there was a staff vacancy for the majority of 2020. So that did pass on a 66% cost savings to your township at that time. We did, of course, complete the SSEA and SS merger in 2020. Long-term work planning for the SSS special project was completed in fall 2020. And right now we're working on a 5-year greenhouse gas analysis and implementation report to help deliver on your PCP milestones 4 and 5. And we are focusing our support on our municipal partners in the implementation of your respective municipal climate plans. So we will continue to analyze and reporting your progress to the PCP program and to deliver on your, as I mentioned that, and to deliver an annual progress report to your council that summarizes your PCP program and municipal plan achievements. You are required as a member to designate 1 council and 1 staff member to the program on your behalf. We currently do have Councillor Lianco as our council rep and are waiting confirmation of staff by the township CAO. So these representatives do have a role to act as the municipal point of contact for SSS and the PC program secretariat, receiving the PCP program newsletter, surveys, municipal resources, and they also are there to champion the implementation of the municipality's climate plan within your municipality. So integrating those actions and targets and information into your additional municipal corporate plans and into municipal operations overall. So in terms of how we're helping you specifically move your action plan forward, remember we've just started on implementation. So reports and research are a key service now as we put in the legwork and time to develop reports and prepare jurisdictional scans of best practices that can support your municipal decision-making in relationship to your climate plan. As part of that, we also identify how these different management options connect to your PCP program commitment and how they impact your other municipal goals, such as your council strategic plan, your conservation demand management plan, your capital plan, etc. We've also been providing your team with monthly articles that seek to enhance local climate action and are included in your newsletter and shared via social media. In terms of partnerships, we've always worked closely since the beginning with the Georgian Bay Biosphere and their integrated community energy and climate action plan project, and are pleased to continue to participate in that effort. As I mentioned, I am working on assessing your 5-year greenhouse gas emissions progress and did receive some data from the township. Thank you very much to Julie and Jessica and Jennifer for getting that to me. And that will actually be able to show us how your township is performing in relationship to those greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets that were in your municipal climate plan. And we also participate in committees and initiatives that can help support regional collaborative climate action, which includes the ICE CAP, as noted, led by the GBB, as well as the Simcoe Muskoka Climate Change Exchange, which includes members from the Health Unit, the District, County of Simcoe, Barrie, Aurelia School Boards, and watershed-based environmental planning and development agencies. And we are there representing the interests of our municipal members, including the Township of Georgian Bay. So I thought it may be helpful to provide an example, as I know this is a ton of information, but just to a possible reply to your resident who may ask you, what are you doing? So you have joined the Municipal Federal Partners for Climate Change Protection Program. Your staff, your council, Councillor Bianco, and the SSS project are working to report on your progress and support your municipality with plan implementation. So those are tangible, actual actions that your municipality is currently taking in the response to climate change. And then in terms of a question from your staff or council, so in terms of you have this plan and how are we going to move these actions forward? So we do have the skills, SSS, we're here to help. We have the skills and expertise to answer your questions, the grant and funding know-how, and the municipal and PCP program member connections to get you the information you need to start making decisions on these actions and start trying to move them forward. So our key messages today is we are here to help. We support municipalities in climate change mitigation at an operational level. We connect staff and council to resources such as the PCP program, FCM funding, best practices, and research. We have a proven successful track record of delivering on the PCP program. Our model is looked at as a strong example of municipal climate action, and we are regularly contacted to share our lessons learned and our municipal partnerships. Right. So we are at, although a lot has been accomplished, and you are now, through to milestone 3 of the PCP program, implementation really is a challenging part of any project like this. But we are at the beginning of implementation for milestone 4, and there's lots of opportunities for action within the program and within your climate plan. So this presentation today was just an overview of how far you've come in terms of your climate journey. But I would like to, and I'd be very happy to return and actually provide a specific presentation on the municipal climate plan itself, the actions within it. And similarly to the district's plan, we have an implementation schedule that does accompany and complement that plan, that does identify the department that is responsible, the costs associated with that type of effort, the amount of greenhouse gas reductions that can be anticipated or expected from the implementation of that action. So, I'd really like the opportunity to come back and speak to you more about the plan itself and kind of reintroduce council and staff to what is actually contained within that plan there and help you work through it. So thank you. I appreciate your time and of course your continued support of the SSS project as we have transitioned to a new project under the guidance of the SSEA's executive director and board members. And I look forward to working with you as we realize the goals in your municipal climate plan, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Ms. Roxborough, thank you very much. Again, you squeezed a lot of information into the 15 minutes or so you took to present all this for us. And if you could stop sharing your screen.
Oh, of course.
Everybody's faces will be a little larger, and I can see if anybody's sticking their hands up.
Right.
I see Councillor Cooper.
Always jumping in there, but just a quick question. Tracy, thank you for the presentation. I was looking at your presentation on a second computer here, and I just wanted to ask you, in terms of the municipal support that you have, I see that you mentioned that there were 8 municipalities. Could you tell me what 8 they are? I was looking at the map and it sort of showed, I think it was one of your early presentation maps that showed, maybe a bit of a broader area. So I wasn't sure if Aurelia and Oro-Medonte and et cetera, which ones are and aren't a part of the program.
Okay, thank you for your question, Councillor Cooper, through your worship. So we do have 8 municipal members as part of the SSEA structure. So that does include Springwater, Oro-Medonte, Severn, yourself, Georgian Bay, Tiny Tay, Midland, and Penetanguishene. Aurelia was originally part of the initial Joint Services Board, but did decide that they wanted to take on that service in-house just due to their size and available resources, etc. As for the specific Partners for Climate Change Protection Program services, we are right now. I'm working with 6 municipalities specifically on their climate plans. So that is yourselves, the town of Midland and Penetanguishene, Severn, Tiny, and Tay. So we are working with Oro-Medonte and Springwater to bring them in to start that process for them as well. But it's not, at this time, they're not specifically involved in the work that I do, but we're hoping to bring them in as partners on that as well.
Just a quick follow-up on that. So the work that you do is basically you were with SSS, correct? And you've been folded in. So you're responding, I guess, regarding that. Just with respect to Aurelia, though, did they just recently drop out, or is that was that many years ago?
To Councillor Cooper, through your worship again, I can't speak directly to the timing of that. What I can do is, if you'd like, I can get that information from our executive director and respond to you and follow up via email, if that would be okay. I believe it was a few years ago, probably 2, but I can't, please, of course I can't confirm that exactly, but I can get back to you.
Well, if you could just follow up on that, I'd appreciate it, because I was, I don't know where I got this information, but I was under the impression that one of the current members recently dropped off, and I'd like to know if that's the case, why, and understand what's going on and how you're going to sort of balance your funding. If you could respond to that either today or through email to council, that would be helpful. It is impactful after all. Thank you.
Of course. And of course, I will follow up as soon as I can and per your direction today or via email to council. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Councillor Rienko.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Aurelia dropped out 3 or 4 years ago. So that's quite a while ago they dropped out. Tracy, thanks for your presentation. Both SSS and SSEA are very good at keeping the various municipalities up to date on their activities and so on, and the councils thereof. With your work, and again, your presentations to the various municipalities, what additional communications do you have with the general public on this? I know you put out certain articles, so maybe you can just talk about how you communicate outside of the municipalities and directly to the residents.
So thank you for your question, Councillor Wanko, through your worship. So, at this time and based on resources, being myself, we do try to specifically focus a lot of our energies on the municipalities, trying to get information to them, responding to their requests, etc. Of course, ideally, I would like to have a full communications plan that would seek to engage the community in these efforts. At this time, I have a basic communication plan, which I do. We have the Sustainable Severn Sound website, where we post regular blog articles, which we then share on social media, Facebook and Twitter. So these are articles, for example, we just posted one recently about what people can do for Earth Day, commenting back to the Climate Change Action Plan and how that relates to their greenhouse gas or carbon footprint. Also, We do, as I noted, create the newsletters that are then shared with our municipalities, such as the ones that appear in your monthly newsletter that I've listed in the presentation there. For example, things about food and climate change, always referencing back to how this relates back to your PCC membership, as well as your municipal climate plan, to let your community know that you are taking these actions in response to climate change. So again, I think in the future, one of the things that we'd like to do, of course, is expand our communication within the larger community. But at this time, our resources have, in a way, restricted us to specifically trying to focus on working with our member municipalities.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands raised, so I'm going to say thank you very much for your presentation. Oh, Councillor Jarvis, under the wire.
No, I had my other hand, my virtual hand up.
Oh, and see, it blends in with that background you have there. It's hard to see. Sorry about that.
Just quickly, we of course we just had the presentation prior to yours with Kevin Boyle on who's climate change coordinator for District of Muskoka. That you guys are working together. I trust that is the case, and just want that confirmation that there's a close association between your actions with SSCA and the actions out of district on their climate strategy, because obviously you guys overlap within our municipality.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Jarvis, and through your worship. Of course, we're always cognizant of that and making sure that we understand what each other is doing. Kevin and I had a good conversation just recently, a couple of weeks back, to talk about some of the actions from the district's climate plan and how that would influence your municipality. And we're confident that our efforts are going to be complementary and not overlapping, and that some of the services that they'll provide will be something that we could not even kind of hope to provide, kind of those larger, more district services and actions, while we focus on things that are specific just for your municipality that we can help influence, but would not fall into the responsibility necessarily of the district. Also, moving forward, we've committed, I'm not speaking on behalf of Kevin, but we did have this conversation about trying to communicate on a more regular basis to ensure that we are working closely together. And in addition, Kevin is the currently the chairperson of the Simcoe Muskoka Climate Change Exchange that I spoke to in my presentation. So we're actually sitting at some of the same tables and making sure that those lines of communication are opening, that we're here to support each other and the municipality.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
And if I may add to that, at a recent IceCap meeting, which of course is the Biosphere initiated similar program, and both Mr. Boyle and Ms. Roxborough were in attendance and participants in that meeting. And I think that's one of the things that I very much enjoy seeing, is all these different groups are working together and learning from each other. For instance, the IceCap has been doing initiating measurement on gas consumption, if you will, or carbon production in regards to boating, which is unique in the country at this point, yet very relevant to people on Georgian Bay. And so I'm very glad to see all the information sharing and cooperation. That's the way we should be doing things. I'm seeing no, I'm getting all choked up about it. I'm seeing no more hands raised. So I'm going to say thank you very much. I greatly appreciate you coming and presenting to us. And I'm entirely confident that we'll be sending questions in your direction over the next little while, and look forward to your next visit. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest, council, that we take a 15-minute break. And at 11 o'clock is when Mr. Mason from the GBB is scheduled to be in front of us. So why don't we all enjoy a little break and reconvene at 11 o'clock sharp. Thank you. Mr. Mason, welcome.
Good morning.
I'm just waiting for everybody sort of to sign in here, and we'll give the screen over to you.
Sounds good.
I am optimistic that Mr. or Councillor Cooper will join us shortly.
I think the climate change presentations are working. Our office is, I'm in our office just for internet speed, and it's freezing cold in here. So we've obviously turned the heat down.
I was noting your outerwear there.
I've tried to have it off a couple times, but anyway.
Well, I'm going to turn the screen over to you. I believe you're going to make a presentation to us on Community Nominated Priority Places Initiative.
Yes. Thanks very much for having me in. This presentation has been actually requested by a number of staff that we've been working with from municipalities and First Nation communities by way of an update on the community nominated priority places. So thanks for having me in this morning, and we'll get going. So as many of you will recall, the Coast of Georgian Bay was awarded federal funding for a community nominated priority places initiative. In the past year, working with our partners, we've come up with a name for the initiative, which is an Anishinaabe name, Mamwe Anjiakazewin, and sort of in the spirit of Anishinaabe language, it's a descriptive name meaning together, renewal, land, and life. And we felt going forward with this collaborative project, it was felt strongly by our Anishinaabe and Indigenous partners that they wanted, and we wanted to have an Indigenous name for this partnership as an act of reconciliation for the kind of work that we're doing together. The Community Nominated Priority Place as a federal program is really about finding ways of working together to protect species at risk as bundles of species. So looking at the habitat in a landscape, in a region where the multiple species that are at risk can be afforded a greater deal of stewardship and protection effort. And this is achieved through our initiative and many of the other priority places across Canada, basically through increased collaboration and partnership. Our main goals, two of them, are to accelerate knowledge generation and collective decision-making for species at risk, so that collaborative capacity. And as well, we want to work together for priority ecosystems, identify where we want to have prioritizing biodiversity protection, improving habitat connectivity where it's at risk, and overall creating greater ecological resilience. We've been fortunate through the funding to have over 4 years, 1.95, well, we'll say $2 million of federal funding support. This is being matched by a range of partnerships, including with Ganamwainam Muskoka, which is the Hemby Wind Project offset funding, who has been providing significant financial support in addition to our various partners. The original co-applicants were Magnetawan First Nation, Shawanaga First Nation, Georgian Bay Land Trust, with ourselves, Georgian Bay Biosphere, as the lead applicant. But as we all know, with these kinds of initiatives, there were many other partnerships. Currently, we're working with about 30 to 40 different universities, organizations, municipalities, and other First Nation organizations and governments on this initiative. And we're really grateful for the varying levels of supports that we're receiving and interest in this project as we move forward. From a project governance perspective, there is a steering committee which consists of the original applicants, and we meet monthly to review the project status and work plans and budgets. And that also includes a partnership with Wissahickon First Nation, who although not an original co-applicant, was heavily involved in the design of the project from the get-go. We have intentions to look at broadening the governance of this project out to what we're currently calling a lands committee, where we want to bring in some representation or involvement from municipal and First Nation governments, as well as other not-for-profits, to provide an overarching sharing and direction pointing for this group. COVID has unfortunately caused that to be delayed, where we had intentions in this last year of working quite closely and in person with First Nation communities and others. And as you can no doubt understand, that has been delayed, and we're working our way towards that. But we've decided instead to consult and engage with communities in a more aggregated fashion, where on different themes we will host a Zoom call and get direction from those involved in that theme. The other part of this governance project, and we mentioned earlier with the name Mamwe Anjiakazewin, is that we want this project to be co-governed, if you will, or co-directed by First Nations, Anishinaabe, and by non-Indigenous organizations. And so through that, we're doing a lot of education around truth and reconciliation training for our partners, developing traditional ecological knowledges, that's TEK, protocols, and looking as we move forward, and we want to develop a legacy for this kind of project and this work. What is that multi-party governance that's going to work for all parties to ensure that the species at risk are being addressed and our biodiversity protection is being addressed on the coast beyond just the 4 years of federal funding? Part of that is with the project evaluation plan is that we have an ongoing assessment of how we're doing on the project. That's in concert with our funding, but as well, we want to be able to turn around and assess how the partnerships are working and where they can be strengthened. So we're not just measuring some biodiversity outcomes, but we're very focused on ensuring that this aspect of working together is done well and improves through time. So the nuts and bolts of what the project is about, the first part is around decision support tools. And really this is about providing the necessary information and tools and systems to support our everyday decisions. So whether you're a municipal government or you're a municipal staff or a First Nation staff, we want to be able to improve the tools that you have access to with respect to biodiversity, ecological information, and species at risk. So hopefully that can infiltrate and integrate into your decisions to the benefit of species, and also that we can find strategies that make it more efficient for the various partners to make their to affect decisions for species at risk. One example of this might be this kind of mapping exercise, a basic mapping exercise where we take a look at where our priority wetlands, where all our wetlands are, and then we map and overlay that with stressors like Phragmites, so that we know as we begin to address where Phragmites is located and we want to manage Phragmites, we can say that, well, we really want to prioritize our inland wetlands as an example. Here are the patches of Phragmites that coincide with those wetlands. They're the first that we would want to address. Of course, we want to eradicate and manage Phragmites all told, but we do want to be able to direct resources to the most effective place and limit that stress as much as possible. So that kind of work and activity around bringing information to bear and to be able to direct the management effort is a big part of our efficiency component. The other aspect of this is just an example of this would be a Modus tower array. And it's probably worth actually us doing a separate presentation on this. These are bird monitoring towers that have been put up on the coast of Georgian Bay that will allow us to learn and understand how our avian species are utilizing the coast, where they're just using flight path areas and stopovers, or where they're actually kind of coming up the coast and then turning and going inland. So we know what habitats need better protection with respect to birds. And this is a piece of information that has not been readily available. Another part of information gathering is around our road surveys and research. And so in the last summer, as an example, and it continues this year, we will be out monitoring a number of priority roadways, and that's the priority roadways are selected based on when they're slotted up for either management, whether that's a repaving or resurfacing or major culvert work, and we'll be targeting road surveys. And this is really about getting staff out and looking at how the road's being utilized by turtles and by reptiles and amphibians, where they're dying in concentrated fashions, unfortunately, on these roads, or where they're using the edges of roads for nesting, as is the example with the project that we did with the Township of the Archipelago last year on Scarivore Road. And in here, what we did is we were able to go in advance of the construction and actually gather and harvest the turtle eggs that had already been laid down there, bring them into our office, incubate them for the year, and then re-release them. We were able to work really closely in this example with the construction company. And really, for me, this is about the crux of this kind of work is about changing hearts and minds. And so by working closely with the likes of construction crews or the general public around showcasing what we're doing about this or how we're doing this work and the importance of this work, then we get folks to change their underlying values and perceptions of things like species at risk. So we were able to involve this gentleman and others from the construction crew in the actual gathering and then the release of the turtles at the end of this, or the end of his project time on this road. Another component of this is trying out, experimenting and learning from different mitigation efforts. And as you're aware, within the Township of Georgian Bay, there are roads that have significant fencing. A number of municipalities have expressed concern about fencing, the costs of fencing, the ongoing management and maintenance of fencing. And so we're looking at trying different strategies. This is an example where we put down riprap next to some culverts in the hopes of discouraging turtles from even wanting to nest here in the first place. This will follow this year with a shoulder-to-shoulder paving from riprap to riprap, whereby in past years, the turtles would have climbed this bank up to the edge of the road where there was sand and gravel and laid their eggs there. We're trying to discourage them entirely from doing that and providing artificial sand habitat on the shoulders of the wetlands, but well away from the roadway, so that the young turtles who are already where ecology sort of says that they're not going to have as much success, we want to try to boost that success by getting them away from killer tires, if you will. I would say that one of the emphasis of this project is also looking at how we can mitigate costs. In this example, by putting ecologists onto the road in the manner that we did, we were able to effectively save more turtles, but also reduce the operation costs for the municipality during this, because they would have had to put up fencing, temporary fencing, that would have cost them about an additional $20,000 to $30,000 over what it cost us to put ecologists in the field to do this work. Another component of gathering information and engaging with the public is around our citizen science. So this is our iNaturalist project, which was launched last year. And this is encouraging and inviting everybody, whether it's municipal staff or municipal councils such as yourselves, to the everyday citizen to engage in this citizen science monitoring. It's an app that you can download on your phone. You can identify the Georgian Bay Biosphere as a project area that you want to enter in sightings. And what's kind of cool about this is that you don't actually have to know a lot about what the species are. So if you take a picture of something and post it here, then all kinds of online experts will come in and they'll tell you, well, that's, you know, a Massasauga rattlesnake, if you didn't know what a Massasauga rattlesnake looked like, and they'll verify your results. It's been a great way of engaging with youth who have this program and don't want to get off their phones, but you can get them outside going on species scavenger hunts. I mentioned the Modus telemetry array. This is kind of what the towers look like, just not on Georgian Bay. They look much different on the bay, of course. This will, as I mentioned, this will provide us really interesting information. The other kind of cool thing about this is that if you're interested in monarch butterflies, is that you can do small projects with these towers where you can put little backpacks on monarch butterflies and track where they're going in an area using these kind of telemetry arrays. Just to end, this presentation is mostly for information, but it's also an opportunity for municipalities to support, yourselves included. We are developing the road management and ecology approaches, and we'll be working with all of our municipal and First Nation roads managers around developing best management practices and presenting those best management practices in a way that makes it most useful and valuable for them and easy for them to incorporate into their practices, but also gets them involved in telling us what's working and what's not working and why, so that we can tweak those BMPs for our region. Similarly, we're working on planning policy and a process review, and that's looking at official plan, zoning, official plan and zoning policies and regulations, but also looking at the processes that you have in place around environmental assessments per se, as you're processing a planning application, to guide it around how it might be tweaked or revised to better represent species at risk protection and interests. Another component where municipalities can be involved is through education and outreach opportunities. I mentioned about the cross-cultural training, the reconciliation training, but there will be other opportunities, especially as we come out of COVID, for public presentations and outreach and education events. And then the cultural and cross-government learning and involvement. Again, as we move out of COVID, it's our hopes that we are able to engage all of you in learning opportunities, but also sharing opportunities about about species at risk protection in your municipality and up and down the coast. So Miigwech, thank you very much for the opportunity to represent this partnership to the municipality, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mason. Perhaps if you stop sharing your screen.
Yeah, as soon as I figure out how to do that.
And I'm not at all surprised to see the first hand I see up is Councillor Cooper, so we'll let him lead off this one, the questions this time as well. Councillor Cooper. You are muted, sir. I waited a whole day and a half to say that to somebody.
Sorry about that. And thank you, Mayor, for acknowledging me, and Greg, great presentation. Really appreciate it. Just one quick question. A lot of it was most interesting. I just wanted to understand what your relationship is with the Modus tracking system. I thought that was the land trust that was instituting that across the Georgian Bay area. Are you involved in some way as well with them, or how is that working?
Yeah, for sure. So the Georgian Bay Land Trust has played a lead role as a partnership on the Community Nominated Party Places program for sure. And funding was provided in part to Georgian Bay Land Trust. So there are many towers on GBLT properties, and they also are developing key research projects that we're kept informed of through this partnership. And then there are other towers that have gone up in provincial parks. There's a tower we're hoping to put up either at Hemby Wind Inlets or Hemby Inlet Wind Power or in the Key River area to help monitor that. So the Modus Tower, I would say, is broadly is another partnership, a collaborative effort. GBLT for sure has taken a lead in that, in addition to a number of key research projects that they have underway.
So just quick follow-up question. So sort of what I'm getting from what you said is that whereas not on a GBLT property, is your organization installing the Modus, or just from an interest point of view, just wondering who's doing that work?
Yeah, it's sort of a collaborative effort. So Bird Studies Canada, actually, we've been working with them to get most of the towers put up into place. And then it's working with wherever the landowner is and putting a tower up there. And then they become the owner of that tower in partnership with us in terms of the transfer of funds to make that tower happen. So, yeah.
Thank you.
I will add to that, if I may, that a couple of the most recent towers that the Land Trust has put up were funded through this program. And so it's one of those programs I love to see, because there are numerous groups collaborating together and working together to serve our area. So I think it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, if I can, if it's not terribly clear, and is that I'm speaking on behalf of a partnership. For sure, we have an organization, but while we receive as a lead applicant all the funds, we disseminate, I would say, about 50% to 2/3 of those funds on an annual basis out to partners to do the work of the community nominated party place.
All right, Councillor Hazelton.
Thank you, and welcome, Greg. Thank you for your presentation. You said a couple of things that I wanted to ask questions about. Number one, is your focus predominantly on biosphere lands, or do you get involved with private lands as well?
Yeah, for sure. So the biosphere itself doesn't actually own any lands. So it's always we work with a region or a territory, and that's so if there are private landowners who want us to be doing work with them, then we absolutely will. So the Modus Tower, as an example, one of the areas where we're looking at putting the tower up on Key River is on private land. So we would partner with a private landowner in that case. In terms of the biological or the ecological mapping, we don't stop at treaty or / crown land boundaries. We do map, do ecological inventories, assessments. We're using GIS strategies on private and crown / treaty lands, and on within reserve boundaries where we have the permission of that First Nation to do that.
Okay, so a follow-up on that. You mentioned specifically a couple of minutes ago. Actually, I have one other question after this. You mentioned a couple of minutes ago that you participate in official plan and zoning bylaw discussions. We passed a resolution yesterday that our staff are going to be investigating strategies in that area. I'm just wondering, is that something that you need to be how do staff engage you to provide your expertise so that we all benefit from it?
For sure. So one of the activities that we're doing, we've met with the planners from all but one municipality, mainly because they don't have a planner, back in November. And one of the activities that we're doing right now is actually bringing the policies from the official plans and the zoning bylaws, as well as understanding the planning processes that are involved for each of the municipalities, so that we can do a side-by-side comparison and share really between the municipalities in the biosphere region about what those policies say and how they either directly or indirectly affect species at risk and or key habitats. We're doing a similar exercise with First Nation communities where they have land codes in place, so that there can be learning about what policies are in place with respect to First Nation lands and those within municipal purview. So that indirectly we'll be providing that sort of side-by-side comparison, and then having discussion with the planners around what's working, what's not working, and then go from there around tweaking that. As well, something that the planners have indicated as a keen interest is the ecological mapping that we'll be providing, which will highlight priority biodiversity areas and habitats for species at risk concerns. And those mapping layers and information are going to be open source, which means that are available to all of our partners, including municipalities. So that'll be a key resource, and the planners that we spoke with had identified that as a really valuable tool that they would make use of in their day-to-day efforts. That doesn't directly answer your question, I recognize, Mr. Hazelton, around how they would access us, but at any time we can be approached to provide the resources of this project and other resources, and we're happy to work with municipal staff in many ways. It would depend on specifically the need, whether it fits into this project or would have to be expanded into something else.
Thank you for that. My final question should be fairly quick. You mentioned something about downloading an app. Is the intent of that for people to document, perhaps with text or pictures, wildlife, species, whatever? And if that is the intent, that might be a great thing for kids or even adults. And can you just tell us either what or send us a copy of the link, or tell us what the right name of the app is, so that we can help us and help you?
Thank you very much. So the app is called iNaturalist, and then you actually have to specifically go in and connect with the Georgian Bay Biosphere Project, and we do have information. I think it's a poster information that we can share with all of you around how to connect and how to utilize that. And indeed, Mr. Hazelton, it is very much about if you see a bird insect, whatever it might be that you find, you can take a picture of it, and the app will actually help you begin to identify it, or maybe make a successful identification. And then there are people who are very much more into ecology and species identification than I am, who go online and review what you've posted, and will verify whether you think a bug is a stink bug or not. It'll say, yeah, that is, or no, that's not, it's this kind of bug, and provide the best identification for that species. And then it gets included into the overall species inventory for the coast of Georgian Bay. So it's not just about the species at risk, it's about really inventorying all the biodiversity aspects and species on the coast. You can do it for plants as well. It's really quite an interesting project. So I'll definitely I'll have Tiana Burke, who's our biologist, reach out with the information on iNaturalist for you. And it is indeed great for kids, although I was using it at our cottage all last summer. So
thank you very much.
Yeah, but you're still a kid. Councillor Jarvis.
I was just going to piggyback on that. I used iNaturalist all last summer. We have our own project on our island. And I'll have to seek information on how to connect with the Biosphere Reserve in that context. But I can do that offline. I just want to encourage everybody. The iNaturalist app is quite simple to use. And yeah, all biodiversity. So we're talking plants, great for identifying plants. And not to mention other species, everything, any species. We've got all kinds of wildlife on our project. And I think it's really good. I think what we'll need to do is figure out how we can share it with our library system as well, Greg. I think it'd be very valuable in that context as well. If you want to get in touch with me on that, I can forward everything on to the appropriate people on that one. But I'm sure I'll be in touch with you anyway on that. Great thing for everybody to use, grandkids and kids particularly. I think it's very, very simple, and most people seem to be infatuated with technology, especially if you're young, and it's a great way to go outside and still be using technology. Wonderful stuff.
All right, thank you. Councillor Bochek.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation, Greg. And my questions may not be able to be answered by you, but in our area of the township, which is Port Severn, we had a very good program here years ago to help keep an eye on our ecosystem. We have a large population of fox snakes here. And for years and years and years, the Canadian government would come in, the Canadian van would pull up with Canada written on the side, they'd climb out with antennas, and they'd walk around and follow the snakes that had some sort of tracking device on them. That practice stopped when the build out of the Oak Bay subdivision began. And we haven't seen anybody here tracking the snakes for probably 10 years or maybe more. We have a huge hypervernaculum in the area, which certain times a year you can see thousands of fox snakes in. And it's a very important part of our ecosystem here. And the residents that are concerned think there's been a big upset in our ecosystem because of the build out and not concentrating on the fox snakes. I'm wondering if your group of people would be interested in, obviously everything's being downloaded from the provincial and federal governments these days. I'm just wondering if your organization would be interested in picking up some of this work or investigating into where it is and what we can do to try and reestablish something.
For sure, we'd be interested in looking into that with you. I can also say that the national park in your area has also been in conversations with us about a program around the road ecology component. But as I believe I understand where the hibernaculum is with respect to Port Severn, road ecology would probably come into play, and so that there may well be an opportunity to engage in some tracking there. And so I'll absolutely take this under advisement and talk with David Bywater, Tiana, as well as our colleagues at Georgian Bay Islands National Park, and see what
that would be great. I mean, in the last realm of talks with them, which was quite some years ago, we got them to put signs up on Honey Harbor Road, break for snakes, things like that, because the the nomadic trail of these snakes does run right across Honey Harbor Road, and at certain times of year, there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
And we just feel that the population has diminished, the awareness is not there anymore, and we see a huge increase in population of field rats, field mice, moles, and voles, and that's all part of the ecosystem that, when untouched, controlled itself quite well. But since the build out, things have not gone well here. So maybe it's something we can look at through your organization.
Happy to reach out and see what we can do.
Great, thank you.
Okay, unfortunately, our time is up, but I want to thank you very much, Mr. Mason, for your presentation. As I mentioned earlier, I think it's wonderful, all the collaborative work that's going on between all the different groups, and I appreciate your support of our planning department and your research you're doing in that area as well. I think that's good for the entire bay, not just our township, and so I think that is very good, and I want to thank you again for your work in that regard. And Councillor Cooper, we're out of time, so I'm going to give you, if you're very fast.
I would just, on the remark that you made about coordinating with our planning department, I would really strongly encourage that. As I understand it, the GBA is also coordinating, and maybe you're working with them, I'm not sure, but I know that the GBA is coordinating an examination of the policies, planning policies up and down the shores of Georgian Bay, and our planning department could certainly benefit from the work that you do along.
Yeah.
I believe you do some work with the archipelago, so you have a very good understanding of coastal Georgian Bay. And thank you, Mayor, for the time to make that comment.
For sure, Councillor Cooper, we are aware of the efforts of GBA, and we'll do everything we can to reduce any duplicative effort and impacts on your staff. So we try to be as efficient as possible.
I just think it's terrific, the addition of tools and information that we've been getting in the last few years, and all the work that's being done on the mapping, for instance, and all that we're going to be equipped with a lot more information going forward, which will be very useful for the various decisions that we all have to make. Thank you again for your presentation. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You as well. Thank you. Madam Clerk, I saw that Mr. Flannery was in the waiting room, so to speak.
Yes, he is. I'm just moving him into the meeting room.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Mr. Flannery, welcome to the Township of Georgian Bay Council meeting. And
delighted to be with you.
You have a presentation to make to us about wake assessment.
I do, and I understand there's a time constraint of 10 minutes, so I'll speak quickly. I'm
well,
glad. Yes.
To be in fairness, we've allowed everybody else half an hour, including questions. So if you go a few minutes over in your presentation, I don't think people will be jumping up and down.
All right, a light won't go off and an alarm like the Court of Appeal. Good, I like that.
It might at noon hour.
Okay, I'll be careful with that. People get hungry. As you know, I did put a lot of material before you in writing. I, in one way, apologize for that, but in another way, I hope that assists council and staff in terms of seeing just where we're at and giving particulars that you would otherwise have in terms of questions. I think our request is fairly simple and direct. I don't think it's the first time you've entertained it. Certainly I see some of the records. I see, for instance, there was a building department report July 13th, 2015, essentially contemplating the same type of relief we're requesting. It may deviate a little bit in terms of particulars. We relied on our assessment, the wake assessment, put forward by our expert from Baird. And I'm sure you've seen his CV and 25 years of experience and credentials. Many of the VORR questions are answered in that report in terms of some of the more technical pieces of information. I'm more than happy to try to refer to various places for that, depth of water, et cetera, and whatnot, page 17, dimensions, et cetera. But I can tell you that if there are further questions, we are more than willing to defer the matter and take them back to our expert and obtain whatever information is further required by council and would assist in your deliberations. But basically, we're asking for a speed limit to deal with the wake that results. And he, in his estimation, has ranged it from 9 kilometers an hour to 12 on page 18 of the recommendations. He's given reason why, and that is simply to say that, for instance, the 9 was found in front of the Delawana and was already put in place and is within the ambit of the federal legislation and approved. And so that's a good starting place. Secondly, he's gone to some great effort and time, length, and trouble to set out the various technical data and the actual reports, and those that were seen visually as well as not just the data, in terms of what happens when the wakes arise out of the speed limits or lack of speed limit that exists in the area in question. So I leave it to council to ask me further questions about that, and if I cannot answer them, we are more than pleased to go back to our expert, as I had mentioned. I had asked your building department, a person, Kaylee Nicholson, and she was good enough to get back to me to say, well, she just hasn't received anything. So I wasn't aware of whether or not our materials would have been circulated to her, apparently, or they were not. But I do note that when this matter came before council, historically, before, that that particular department obviously was dispatched to provide a further report for council and to come back with recommendations. I also note that at that time, the recommendation was that there be a resolution and that there would be a proposed restriction and setting a speed limit. For reasons known to council at that time, which of course now is obviously manned by different people, council didn't act on that. We realize that the federal government, the tribunal that governs this under the Canada Shipping Act, has jurisdiction and may indeed also have many other questions. We are obviously gearing up towards that, but we want to be able to perhaps even jointly with the township go to the federal government together. And we think that'll make for a stronger application. We think that the recommendations are in fact very reasonable under the circumstances, and that quite frankly there has been the need for this for some time. The evidence that we had put before you in terms of affidavits are but a sprinkling. There's a petition with a number of people. The affidavits provide particulars, but you'll notice there's a commonality of theme there. And one of the largest issues brought up time and time again is safety. And in fact, there's been outlines in some of the affidavits, and I'll use one as an example, Mr. Peter Kimmerer, who apparently uses a walking stick, I believe. Am I got the right one? Yes. Oh no, pardon me. It is Peter Kimmerer. Apparently has been injured, and there have been other incidents and reporting of injuries. Again, safety is not only an element that's mentioned in all of the affidavits, but is front and center in the report, is consistent with the federal government regulations, and frankly is consistent with your own issues and your own priorities, and that is to say safety. Yes, there's property damage. Yes, there's soil erosion, or I should say shore erosion. And yes, there's other ramifications that come from this. You know, I couldn't help but listen in. It was interesting to hear your former issue that preceded us, and there was an environmental slant. Quite frankly, when you have speeds of this nature without limit, and you have wakes, and you operate a marina, such as is the case with my clients, and we're not alone, as you know, there's a number of marinas on the channel. You have everything from safety, but also environmental concern. You have gas spillage, for instance, which cannot be a good thing for the environment. We all know benzene, toluene, who needs all of that in the water? You have an effect on everything from fish spawning grounds to vegetation and what have you. And so obviously wildlife will be affected as well. This is clearly also then within the ambit of council, with I would suspect everyone's concern, given some of the commentary I had just heard, which I was happy to hear. And it seems to me that we are perhaps potentially all on the same page as to wanting to do the right thing. I had addressed all of the specifics in the regulation that you have put forward, the VORR, and there are the 4 criteria. I believe they have all been met, and the particulars are within my April 1st letter where I address those issues. And then following that, because they are really prerequisites before we get into the rest of the particulars, I have set out the answers to the 9 specific questions that are found in your regulations. And again, oftentimes referring to our expert report. And so that's really what we're after from council. I suspect today you may wish to consider referring this once again to your building department, which I believe has jurisdiction of this for your particular municipality, this issue. And you may want to have them prepare an assessment again and recommendations for council, which is often the case when you're deliberating. And you may then wish to defer until that report comes along, and that's fine. But clearly, we would like to see a speed limit. We would like to see it in the prescribed area, and we would like to see it that it be somewhere in the range of 9 to 12 kilometers an hour. So those are my comments in a preliminary way. If anybody has questions, I'd be more than happy to entertain them.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Flannery. I already see Councillor Wanko's hand up, so we'll go to him first.
Thank you very much for your presentation and your efforts in this area. I guess I was around in 2015 when this first came up. And we developed a policy on the VORs for our township. And we found through the process that, yes, it's really, it's the township may support it. And if there's a report coming from our planning department, we'll very seriously consider a resolution. But the issue we found that in order to get the federal government to pass a legislature, you had to get the province involved. So they've got to be able to support it and make a recommendation. And then it goes to the federal government. And at that time, back in 2015, and correct me if I'm wrong, but according to the information that we were provided, is the federal government hasn't passed one of these VORs in like 30 years or something like that. So I don't know if I'm not sure, I want to say wasting our time, but the point is, have we softened up the federal government to even consider making a decision that they haven't made in the last 30 years? So, how much work have we done at the federal level to get an idea that there's a potential there for them to consider this in their legislation?
Well, I can only tell you that the political climate has changed somewhat, first of all. the personnel that inhabit the tribunal are obviously rotated from time to time. The emphasis of this current government couldn't be any more clear, as found in their most recent, quite frankly, their convention on the weekend with their policy initiatives, but also in their budget and in some of the other planning and things that we've seen. And that certainly has involved waterways. They have passed legislation that's consistent with safety, environmental concerns, etc., both on the oceanic level and otherwise, but again, waterways. And so we feel that there's great potential just with respect to the issues and the topic for it to be politically popular at that level, but also in addition to that, and in terms of softening it up, although I don't wish to put too fine a point on the matter, sometimes these things are discussed on an informal basis, sometimes amongst various other people. And quite clearly, that is part of the process, and you can be assured that we are approaching the matter at that level. In terms of the province, I can indicate to you the same thing is being done. There's certain contacts that we are in touch with, but frankly today, this stage is a preliminary stage in that one of the things that I am quite sure they are going to ask us is, have you gone to the municipality? And do you have their support, and what is their feeling on the matter? And so while I understand you may be concerned on the journey about 100 miles up the road, we're 100 miles back and at this stage. And that's why I'm here today. And that's why I'm speaking to council for this kind of endorsement today as a step towards the ultimate goal.
Councillor Cooper, followed by Councillor Bocek.
Thank you, Mayor Kutzier and Mr. Flannery for your report. I may have missed it. I've read through the Baird report, but not line by line. And your communications, I must have missed it, but where is the prescribed area? Have you got something on your presentation that talks about, or not talks about, but shows the prescribed area?
They spoke about Big Dog Channel, so it would be similar to that. But on page 17, there's the very dimensions and a map giving channel width and depths as well.
So sorry, page 17 in the Baird report?
Yes, sorry about that. Yes.
Okay,
and,
so I'd like to draw, sorry, go ahead.
In addition to that, clearly it's up to council, you exercising its discretion if it wants to be more specific or define a particular area. Again, when I look at the matter historically and the recommendations that were put forward in the building department in 2015 in the analysis, there were, aside from the options that were put forward, the strategic plan and the same delineation of some of the particulars that you're requesting. So council is free to either use page 17 in that map in that area and the description as a guide, or to deviate from it somewhat where you have jurisdiction. If you want more particulars, if you want more specifics, we can do that. I can go back and get that.
So I'm looking at page 17.
Yes.
And I'm still not, I'm sorry to be so dense, and maybe my map isn't big enough. Let me try and expand it. But from where to where are you suggesting?
All right, so there are already a number of speed limit zones. And what we're suggesting is the area in which there is no speed limit zone existing.
Got it. But
there you go.
But where from? Still doesn't tell me, it doesn't answer my question. I'm asking From where to where? I know where the speed zones are presently, but I'm not understanding what you're asking for. Are you talking about from
within those
Royal-
boundaries?
What boundaries?
Well, where there is no speed zone currently.
Throughout that whole map, in other words.
Well, ultimately, yes, we'd recommend that. But again, quite frankly, our interest has to do with the channel that exists right in front of Nautilus Marina, the boat club, etc. That's our primary interest. But quite frankly, I believe the township would probably be well advised to look at all of those areas that have no speed zone. Those problems exist, I'm sure, for people that live in these other various areas that have cottages, that also have property damage and shore erosion, and that safety, again, is probably a huge issue for all of them as well.
So thank you for the clarification. That's a very broad area. And I would suggest that this is a really tough sell, what you're talking about in terms of that broad an area. If you were talking from Royal Island past the Nautilus Marina, that might be one thing. The rest of it, I can tell you that our community might decide to move to a marina in Penetang. So we need to think pretty hard about that. Commerce could be going right down the toilet. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bocheck, followed by Councillor Hazelton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Tim, for the presentation. I was fairly involved in 2015 with trying to instill a VOR for the Big Dog Channel, Little Dog Channel area, spearheaded by Michael Diamond and myself. And we ran into a lot of obstacles, of course. We had our building department get involved. My understanding is, yes, the Canadian government has not issued a VOR in some time, maybe 30 years. And I really think we're going to have to put the pressure on the feds here. I agree with Councillor Cooper. We need to narrow down the scope of the area to be very defined. But have you reached out to the Métis Council or the First Nations Council on this? I think being that they have a very strong voice with the federal government, and we have a very large population of First Nations and Métis people in the Honey Harbor area, which this is their ancestral harvesting grounds and things like that. I think it can only help to involve them in the process. You certainly have my support on this, and I hope that council will support it as well. I think part of the problem we had in 2015 was the mountain of paperwork, the 2-inch deep files that had to be filled out. We do not have the staff, the expertise, or the ability and the funding to put towards this. So I'm glad to see the initiative coming from one of the business owners and your involvement in it, and certainly hope that our collective voice as council can help move this along, and that we move in this direction, because I think it's of value to every resident in the Honey Harbor area that we control the speed through that area. And I thank you for your work.
Well, I'd like to thank you for that recommendation. Obviously, I thought more of up the road in terms of approaching the Indigenous population, the various band councils involved. But that's an excellent idea. You're right. It's clearly a political hotspot these days. And I have approached MPs and cabinet ministers, but certainly you are quite correct that that is something that is going to be front and center in terms of decision making.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Hazelton, followed by Councillor Jarvis. I guess I have to catch myself on the mute.
I can see your lips moving, but anyways. Tim, thank you very much for your presentation and also all of the volume of information provided. I have to confess that I was not originally in favor of the idea of speed limits. I do have a history. 40 years ago, I was the guy that put speed limits on Go Home Lake. And we had broad consensus on Go Home Lake as to what we did up there. But what I have seen recently with the petitions and the affidavits and the studies and the work, I think you guys have done, first of all, way more work than I had to do 40 years ago. I think that you have provided us enough information that we need to rally behind you and help try to find a way to move this ball forward. I'm very, very respectful of Councillor Cooper's comments about where does this start and where does this end. And I think things that probably need to be considered in this is where do boats slow down and where do boats speed up? Because that's going to have an impact with mega wave action as they pull away, so to speak. I think those considerations need to be tuned up a little bit. And it sounds like Councillor Bocek would be interested in working with you on that, as would I. But I think that we have a disaster waiting to happen here. We have, as a township, witnessed speed zones through the narrow Delawano Channel and Royal Island to the point of the new port of Honey Harbor. Then no speed limits until we get down to the rocks just north of Picnic Island. That's the way it was when I bought my cottage in '93 here in Honey Harbor. And then magically, mystically, sometime after that, the entire bay was designated as a speed zone. And so that was a complete change. I don't remember any public process to get there, but there was a huge change, and there's a lot of people that are disgruntled about the fact that they have to crawl through that entire bay. But the area that you're talking about has definite visibility of problems and complications of boat wake, safety issues, etc., not to mention all of the other ecological impacts of the wave action that is going on there. So I 100% support you in your path here. And I think that we need to find a way to work with you to move this ball forward, to see if we can get it to a point where it makes sense to, as you were kind of alluding to earlier, take it up the path, ensure that you can get provincial support for it and federal support for it. But if we don't try, we're never going to get there. And with the amount of work that you've already done, I think we have a very important sized kernel of work ready to go. And I think we need to get behind you on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, I'm of two minds on this. I'm curious to know if maybe Nautilus isn't thinking of themselves as designers of their own fate here by continually pushing their dockage out into the channel. That and private landowners doing the same with their docks have created a very serious, and I agree, choke point where there is likely to be a disaster at some point in time. But over my years, I mean, I'm one of those disgruntled boaters that would be upset to see a speed zone on the one hand, since I go through there regularly to access my marina. But on the other hand, that channel has narrowed over the last 20 years significantly by virtue of the fact that people, all marinas, I won't single out Nautilus, but other marinas as well, pushing their envelope out into the waters of that channel, not to mention cottagers applying for and getting the required approvals for pushing their docks further out into that channel as well. I'm really afraid that somebody's going to hit something out there, if not another boat, and that's going to be very, very concerning. The other thing is marinas, by virtue of their own business, encourage this. They're encouraging boats of any sort. They provide all the services that boaters, recreational boaters, or watercraft users need to get around. I don't see how Nautilus, I mean, it almost seems hypocritical in my mind that this approach is being made. Having said that, again, I agree that there's a choke point there that's going to create a minor disaster at some point in time, and we've got to figure out how to resolve that. I'm not even sure what the answer is. I'm not necessarily against the VORR, but I don't understand how somebody who's created an issue is now asking other people to help solve it. That's sort of where I'm coming from on this.
I can respond to that if you'd like.
Only very quickly because we're out of time and I want to make a few comments.
All right. Nautilus, and I suspect none of the marinas, are encouraging speed. They're providing a necessary service. People wouldn't have boats and wouldn't be able to use them and access islands and docks without their boats, and that needs a marina. And they need slips during part of the year as well. If dockage is an issue and the narrowing of the channel is an issue, there are other ways to deal with that. But as you said, this has increased the safety issue, not decreased it. And so now the situation may even be more dire. And safety is the #1 issue.
I see your hand, Councillor Wanko, but I want a chance to speak, and everybody else has had one chance. I will be quite honest with you. I have mixed feelings about speed laws. I'm old enough to remember when there were none. And we used to go between Delawan and Royal Island on a full plane, and because there weren't very many boats around. Since that time, we have a lot more boats. We have a lot more larger boats. We have boats designed to make oversized wakes that were never around before. It's a different world. I am one who is very frustrated by what Councillor Hazelton has observed, that when you go through the Royal Channel and you're headed towards Picnic Island, that whole large open area is a speed zone. I find that very frustrating. I also find what's frustrating about speed zones is that they are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks of the year, which means when you're boating in November and nobody's around except maybe an OPP boat, and you're not causing any harm to anyone, you can still get pulled over. And so I find that very frustrating. I also find it very frustrating when I go out in my tinny and I have to, go along at some obnoxiously slow speed, where even if I'm at full speed, I'm not creating a wake that you would even notice. And so speed is an unfortunate attempt to control wakes, because what you're going to do, and we know this very well, because if you get on the main channel and there's a speed zone created on the main channel that was put in at time of high water when people are getting very concerned about shore erosion. A lot of boats are making a fair bit of wake there because they slow down to a plow. And it may be a little safer from a speed point of view, but it doesn't necessarily protect the shoreline that much. So I have mixed feelings. Having said that, from a safety point of view, where it's very narrow in front of the two marinas, I could understand a desire for a speed zone there, because it can get very busy in the summer and people are coming in and out and around. And I am concerned from a safety point in that particular area. I would certainly not be in favor of a speed zone over the entire area. I think we have some spots now that have a speed zone that shouldn't. But having said that, there are a few spots where I think it would be appropriate. But then we have this frustrating system where the township has to apply to the federal government to get a speed zone that will be enforced by the provincial government. I don't know who created all these governments and all their different levels and complications, but this is one of those examples where it doesn't quite work the way you think it should. On the roads, the local municipality can set speed limits on some of the roads. It's much more clear. So I appreciate this is a very frustrating process. With that, Councillor Wanko, you've had your hand up for a while, so if you have one last remark, and then we'll close this down, please.
Well, I think it's good to have me as last. I was just wondering what the path forward here. It looks like council is interested in looking at some form of VOR for this area. We don't know the area yet. Maybe Jessica there somehow. How does council how do you put something in front of council that we can make a decision on this? Obviously, you got to work with the planning department. Do they got to prepare a report? I think the report should be very specific as to the area this is going to apply to, et cetera, et cetera. Is this what we have to do in order to get this in front of us? Is a resolution is what they need to move forward? What has to happen in order to move forward?
So it's slightly complicated at this moment in time because we adopted the agenda yesterday. So we cannot add a resolution to this agenda today. We would need a resolution to direct staff to prepare that report, and that would have to wait until the next council meeting.
Okay, so now we passed a resolution asking staff to look at it. What does staff do? Do they prepare a report? What do people need in the way of a resolution? Like, what's the steps to get it out the door?
I'm sorry, I'm unclear. Just a resolution for us to prepare a report. Staff would look into it and do what they're responsible for. Dave was on the meeting. I don't do VORs, so I'm not sure what kind of report you would be expecting.
I would imagine we'd expect a report that said, this is what would be required if we chose to make an application to the federal government to put a speed zone in.
That information is already outlined in the policy though, so that would be kind of a waste of time.
But we have to be very specific of where it starts and where it ends. And I don't know how we go about that. Do we use who decides where it starts and where it ends?
So one more time, I'm going to say Dave is on the meeting. Dave, that's your cue.
Mr. Fedori, are you willing to show your face?
Thanks, Jess.
Yeah, no problem.
So once council decides that they want to move forward with this, we would do the policy. The part of the problem that we will face is they haven't approved any VORs for quite some time. Kaylee and I had a meeting up on Go Home Lake, and Jonathan Doan at the time, he came out to the meeting and spoke as well, and they wanted some more speed signs, and he flatly told them no, it would not happen, and they wouldn't be able to proceed. And same with Big Dog Channel. We went down that path and it got turned down as well. I'm not saying that this won't happen. You'd have to start the process, and it's a long process. We would need some sort of staff help in preparing the reports, because the building department wouldn't have time to do this with us being down an inspector. And then the other question I would have, if you did get the VOR signs approved, where are you going to install them on that channel? So if council wants to go forward and we bring the report, there's mountains of paperwork that need to be filled out for something that may or may not ever happen.
Okay. So we have challenges in front of us, but at this point, because it's a delegation, we're not making any decisions at this stage. And so I'm just going to say thank you very much for all the information. Mr. Flannery, we certainly very thorough reports about the wakes. It's nice to have specifics as a starting point. And I'm sure council will contemplate asking staff for at least a report or something like that. I can see that happening in the near future, but I don't want to speak for council until we make that decision.
Thank you so much for hearing from us. And I can only blame section 91 and 92 of the BNA in answer to your earlier question about complexity.
Yes, well, you know, precedent is something that I think lawyers are very familiar with.
Yes, we are. We'll work on it.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I believe, unless our clerk is going to correct me, that's the end of our regular council meeting, other than the formalities to end it. All right. So I have moved by Councillor Hazelton, seconded by Councillor Rienko. Be it resolved that council adopts bylaw 2021-022 to confirm the proceedings of the April 12 and 13, 2021 council meeting. All those in favor? And that is carried. Moved by Councillor Jarvis, seconded by Councillor Bocek. Be it resolved that council knows now adjourned at 12:08 p.m. until Monday, May 10th, 2021 at 9 a.m. or the call of the chair. All those in favor? And that is carried. And this is a reminder that we have a committee of the whole meeting starting at 1.